Chapter 2964. Xiao Chen was a little speechless about the relationship between Xiao Yao and Dongfang Lin, but he didn't stop them. Xiao Chen was a little speechless about the relationship between Xiao Yao and Dongfang Lin, but he didn't stop them. Firstly, there was nothing wrong with Dongfang Lin, and secondly, Xiao Yao did like Dongfang Lin. He couldn't force them to break up because of him. Moreover, with Xiao Chen's understanding of his son, he knew that even if he asked, Xiao Yao wouldn't agree. This kid had been very opinionated since he was young. When it came to Xiao Yao, Xiao Chen really didn't worry too much. He started over from a young age and did things with great importance. However, once he decided on something, he would be like himself. No one could persuade him otherwise. When he thought of Xiao Yao and Dongfang Lin, Xiao Chen had a headache. However, Xiao Lao wasn't bad. It seemed that he had won over Lin Shui. On the other side, Lin Yun's residence. They hadn't seen Lin Shui for a few days. Lin Yun casually asked Lu Bingning and the other girls, "Where's Xiao Shui? Why haven't I seen her for a few days? Did she go out?" "You don't know? She went out to travel with Xiao Lao." "With Xiao Lao?" Hearing Lu Bingning's answer, Lin Yun was stunned at first, and her face immediately turned ugly. Of all people, why did she have to be with Xiao Chen's son? Thinking of Xiao Chen's beaming face at the moment, Lin Yun was anxious. Could it be that Xiao Chen's son really succeeded? Why didn't you tell me about such an important thing? In Lin Yun's opinion, this was a big deal, but in the eyes of Lu Bingning and the other girls, this was not a big deal at all. Moreover, the girls didn't have any objections to Lin Shui and Xiao Lao being together. Although compared to Xiao Yao's calmness and Xiao Lao's impatience, in terms of cultivation talent, Xiao Lao was still above Xiao Yao. In addition, Xiao Lao treated Shui Lin well. It was obvious that he really liked Shui Lin. In addition to the relationship between the two families, Lu Bingning felt that there was no problem. However, looking at Lin Yun's appearance, it seemed as if something incredible had happened. Seeing that, the girls all covered their mouths and chuckled. Qing Zhu even said, "What's wrong? You look like you're facing a great enemy. Isn't it just a small matter?" "Small matter? How could this be called a small matter? Xiao Chen's son and Xiao Shui. No, I have to go and find Xiao Chen." With that, Lin Yun hurriedly left. In fact, it wasn't that Lin Yun looked down on Xiao Lao. It was mainly because she was unhappy in her heart. Lin Yun felt uncomfortable in her heart when she let Xiao Chen's son settle her daughter so easily. Especially when she thought of Xiao Chen's smug look, Lin Yun felt even angrier. Even if she wanted to be together, she absolutely couldn't let Xiao Lao succeed so easily. At least, she had to let Xiao Chen beg her. Thinking of this, Lin Yun quickly arrived at Xiao Chen's residence. As soon as she entered the door, she said with an unfriendly expression, "Xiao Chen, tell me, where did your son trick my Xiao Shui?" Seeing Lin Yun's flustered and exasperated look, Xiao Chen said with a smile, "What's wrong with you? Why are you so anxious? Come, sit down first and tell me slowly. Don't give me that. Where's Xiao Shui?" Xiao Chen personally poured a glass of wine for Lin Yun. Looking at his flustered and exasperated look, he couldn't help but want to laugh. In this regard, Lin Yun naturally saw it all. She didn't need to think to know that this guy must be overjoyed. The more Xiao Chen acted like this, the more displeased Lin Yun was. How could her precious daughter marry into the Xiao family so easily? "I say, are you going to interfere in the matters between these two children?" Xiao Chen asked with a smile as he poured Lin Yun a glass of wine. There was a hint of ridicule in his words. Xiao Chen, it won't be so easy for Xiao Shui to marry into the Xiao family." "Oh, but the two little guys have already confirmed their relationship. As a father, you won't break them up, right?" Xiao Chen didn't take Lin Yun's threat to heart at all. "Anyway, Lin Shui likes my son now. What can an old man like you do?" He was happy in his heart. On the other hand, Lin Yun was very depressed. What was this? She didn't pay attention and actually allowed Xiao Chen's foolish son to succeed. If Lin Yun knew that this would be the outcome, she would definitely keep a close eye on her daughter and not give Xiao Lao any chance to get close to her. With a cold snort, Lin Yun unhappily drank the wine in her glass in one gulp. Seeing this, Xiao Chun said with a smile. Actually, your son marrying my daughter and my son marrying your daughter. Isn't this just right? We're even. No one is at a disadvantage. Bullsh asterisk T. Xiao Chun, let me tell you. It's not that easy to marry my daughter. I don't agree. It's impossible. Lin Yun was completely at a disadvantage now. If Lin Shui really liked Xiao Lao, there was nothing she could do. Despite what he said, there was no way Lin Yun would actually break up the two of them. After all, he was just holding a grudge with Xiao Chun. As soon as she finished speaking, Lin Yun looked coldly at Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun also smiled slightly. At this moment, Xiao Lao and Lin Shui walked over from the backyard. As soon as she saw Lin Yun, Lin Shui called out happily, "Father." Lin Shui didn't know that her father was here to denounce her. She hadn't seen Lin Yun for a while, so she was naturally very happy. Looking at her daughter, Lin Yun's expression also softened. However, when she saw Xiao Lao, Lin Yun's face instantly darkened. "Uncle." Even when Xiao Lao greeted her, Lin Yun only snorted coldly. Obviously, she was sulking in her heart. After cuddling with Lin Yun for a while, Lin Shui took the initiative to speak. "Dad, I won't talk to you anymore. Brother Lao and I still have to go out." "Where are you going?" Hearing this, Lin Yun suddenly became excited. Don't worry about it." However, Lin Shui's face turned red and she didn't answer. Looking at Lin Shui's appearance, Lin Yun was even angrier. It was obvious that she had fallen in love. Her daughter seemed to have been completely conquered by Xiao Lao. As an experienced person, how could Lin Yun not see that the two of them were like a young couple in love? What else could they do other than go out at this time? Lin Yun looked at Xiao Lao faintly. Facing the gaze of her old father, Xiao Lao felt uncomfortable. Fortunately, Lin Shui came to the rescue. She stepped forward and took the initiative to hold Xiao Lao's hand in front of Lin Yun. Then, she waved to Lin Yun and Xiao Chun and directly pulled Xiao Lao to the door. "Dad, Uncle Xiao, we're leaving." "Okay, be careful." Facing Lin Shui's farewell, Lin Yun's face was gloomy and she didn't say a word. On the other hand, Xiao Chun replied with a face full of smiles. She looked extremely happy, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2965. Lin Yun watched Lin Shui and Xiao Lao leave with a bright smile. Looking at Xiao Chun's expression, Lin Yun couldn't help but get angry. Lin Yun watched Xiao Chun and Xiao Lao leave with a bright smile. Looking at Xiao Chun's expression, Lin Yun couldn't help but get angry. "Why are you smiling so happily? Let me tell you, don't think that my daughter will be controlled by your family just like that. I haven't agreed to this matter yet." Lin Yun meant that as long as he didn't agree to this matter, Lin Shui couldn't marry into the Xiao family. In response, Xiao Chun curled his lips and said, "If you don't agree, then I won't agree. When the time comes, I won't agree to the matter between Luan Luan and Lin Feng either." It was a naked threat. Lin Feng and Xiao Wan had already reached the point of discussing marriage. Even Qin Shuru and Lu Bingning had already begun to discuss these details. At this time, if Xiao Chun didn't agree, then things would indeed be troublesome. Lin Yun looked at Xiao Chun unhappily. Facing Lin Yun's gaze, Xiao Chun didn't care and just smiled. "Little guy, you still want to fight with me? I've already grasped your weakness. When the time comes, let's see if Lin Feng won't fight with you to the death." If anything happened to Xiao Wan, Lin Feng would probably really fight with his life. Therefore, Xiao Chun really wasn't worried about Xiao Lao and Lin Shui. Besides, did it matter whether Lin Yun agreed or not? Don't forget that he still had a few wives at home. As long as Lu Bingning and the other women nodded, would Lin Yun have any room to object? Both sides were so familiar with each other. Lin Yun had already figured out the situation of Lin Yun's family. She wasn't afraid of this old guy threatening her at all. Lin Yun felt like she had been completely controlled by Xiao Chun. She gritted her teeth and fiercely drank a mouthful of wine. "All right, you win. If I don't drink myself to death today, I'm not leaving." For the time being, she didn't have any good ideas. Lin Yun could only use alcohol to vent the displeasure in her heart. Regarding this, Xiao Chun was naturally unafraid. After knowing each other for so many years, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun had drunk together countless times. Of course, they had their own rules when it came to drinking. First of all, they couldn't use their spiritual power to dissolve the alcohol. Otherwise, the two of them wouldn't have gotten drunk. Everyone knew the rules, and this time, Lin Yun was obviously angry, so she drank bravely. However, Xiao Chun was not afraid at all. The two of them were evenly matched. Neither of them was afraid of the other. In one night, the two of them drank a lot of wine, and they didn't use their spiritual power to dissolve it. In the end, they didn't even know when they got drunk. When Qin Shiru and the others arrived at the courtyard, they saw Xiao Chun and Lin Yun lying unconscious in the pavilion in the courtyard. These two old guys, looking at Xiao Chun and Lin Yun sleeping soundly, Qin Shiru and the others smiled bitterly. Then, they called the servants and helped the two of them back to their rooms. Lin Yun naturally stayed at Xiao Chen's place to rest. At the same time, Qin Shiru also ordered someone to inform Lu Bingning so that she wouldn't worry. These two guys had a good relationship, but when they were together, they weren't serious at all. Sometimes they were even crazier than Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Lin Feng, and the others. Just like now, even Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others wouldn't be so drunk. Xiao Chun, don't be happy too early. It's not that easy to let Xiao Schwim marry into your Xiao family. Hee, if you don't agree with Lao, I won't agree with your Lin Feng. Completely drunk, the two of them were still talking drunkenly. In this regard, Qin Shiru and the others helplessly face-bombed. After sleeping for a whole day, the two of them woke up one after another. When they thought of how drunk they were, whether it was Xiao Chun or Lin Yun, they felt a little embarrassed. Therefore, Lin Yun didn't stay for long and left in a hurry. But even before leaving, Lin Yun didn't forget to leave a ruthless sentence. Xiao Chun, just you wait. Do you think I'm afraid of you? I'll wait. Xiao Chun and Lin Yun became a laughingstock for everyone because of the farce of the younger generation. Even Mo He, Mu Ling Xian, and the others laughed so hard after hearing this. This kind of life made everyone feel relaxed, but this kind of relaxed moment obviously didn't last for a day. A month later, little Qing came to the land of all living beings again. They had buried the hatchet, so Xiao Chun and the others weren't too surprised by little Qing's arrival. On this day, everyone gathered in the main hall. Little Qing, Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, Mu Ling Xian, and the others were all present. Looking at everyone, little Qing was the first to speak. The land of creation is ready. We can attack the origin world at any time. I think it's better to do this sooner rather than later. Since we have the absolute advantage, we should decide the situation in one fell swoop. Only then can we be considered to have done it once and for all. Little Qing stated her intention as soon as she spoke. She was ready to attack the origin world, which meant that the battle was about to break out again. However, judging from the current situation, this should be the last battle. As long as the origin world was dealt with, the world would truly return to peace. Only then would Xiao Chun and the others be able to live comfortably in the way that they wanted. This battle was definitely unavoidable. It was just a matter of time. Therefore, after hearing little Qing's words, Xiao Chun and the others didn't refuse. They just said with a serious expression, "That's right." However, even though we have the advantage now, we still can't lower our guard. That's right. The origin world has many tricks up their sleeves. No one knows if they have any hidden trump cards or not. Moreover, the origin world hasn't made any moves recently, even though they know that we have formed an alliance. We need to pay attention to this. The news that Xiao Chun and the others had buried the hatchet with little Qing and formed a new alliance couldn't be hidden from the origin world. Everyone present knew this, but even so, the primogenitors hadn't made any moves after a few months. They couldn't help but feel puzzled. Had they given up? Or did they have other plans? No one would believe that the primogenitors had given up completely because of the difference in strength. Because the primogenitors weren't people who gave up easily. Moreover, they knew very well what giving up meant. It was impossible for little Qing to give the primogenitors a way out. Anyone could live, but the primogenitors couldn't. Because if little Qing wanted to become the true spirit of the world, She had to take back the primogenitor's power. Since they hadn't given up, what else could it be? The most likely possibility was that the primogenitors still had some tricks up their sleeves that they hadn't used yet. That trick would allow them to ignore the joint attack of Xiao, Chun, and Little Qing. They would be able to resist the joint attack of the land of beings and the land of creation by themselves. In that case, they couldn't be careless. After all, the origin world had many tricks up its sleeves. Everyone had witnessed it with their own eyes. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2966. The origin world's actions were a little too calm, which gave people a strange feeling. Facing Xiao Qin's group and Little Qing's alliance, they didn't seem to be worried at all. No one knew the reason for this at the moment. However, considering everything that had happened before, it was obvious that they couldn't lower their guard. Even so, Xiao Qin's group and Little Qing decided to strike first to gain the upper hand. After all, they were already prepared. Moreover, their combined strength was obviously stronger than the origin world. Therefore, there was no reason to delay any longer. Only by defeating the origin world would he be able to put an end to this chaotic era and restore true peace to the world. It wasn't like what was happening in their hearts. On the surface, everyone seemed to be at peace, but in fact, undercurrents were surging in the dark. Everyone agreed to attack the origin world. Soon, the land of living beings and the land of creation started to move. They gathered their forces and prepared to attack the origin world at any time. Naturally, their actions couldn't be hidden from the origin world. Of course, Xiao Chun and Little Qing didn't intend to hide it. The battle was about to erupt, so it didn't matter if the origin world knew. In the origin world, the primogenitors already knew that Little Qing and Xiao Chun were planning to attack the origin world. When they gathered together, the primogenitors looked calm. They didn't seem to panic at all. Facing the land of living beings and the land of creation, the primogenitors could still remain calm. The only reason they were confident was the world destruction god. This was the primogenitors' final trump card, but it was also an extremely powerful force. Since the beginning of the world, no one had been able to use the power of death. It was said that a person's death was like an extinguished lamp, but that wasn't the case in reality. Since the world destruction god was born from the power of death, it was equivalent to controlling the power of death in the world. If they guessed correctly, once the world destruction god was born, he would be qualified to fight Little Qing. This was the primogenitor's confidence. They weren't afraid of the land of living beings and the land of creation joining forces. How long will it take for the world destruction god to be born? However, the world destruction god hadn't been born yet, so the Qilin ancestor asked. Hearing this, Ancestor Bai replied, 1 month at most. It's already the final stage. The gestation of the world annihilation deity had been going on for an unknown number of years. However, the primogenitors had let it go into a deep slumber because they had no use for it previously. It had only started to awaken recently. However, awakening the god of Armageddon required a long process. Based on the current situation, it would take about a month. From the bottom of their hearts, the progenitors didn't want to awaken the world destroyer god because he was simply too powerful. It was so powerful that even the primogenitors couldn't control it. Moreover, the world annihilation god had its own thoughts. Once it was awakened, the primogenitors wouldn't be able to control it. To put it bluntly, the world destroyer god was a double-edged sword. He had great power, but there was no way to control it. Therefore, the primogenitors had no intention of awakening the world annihilation deity. But now that Little Qing and Xiao Chun had joined forces, the primogenitors had no other choice. Only by borrowing the power of the world annihilation god could they possibly contend with Xiao Chun and the others. 1 more month? I don't think they'll give us that much time. Activate the grand sealing formation. It should be able to stall them. Yes, that's the only way. Xiao Chun and the others looked like they were about to attack. Obviously, they wouldn't give the primogenitors another month. Therefore, they could only activate the formation and seal the entire origin world to stall for time. As long as the world annihilation god awakened, they would still have a chance to fight. At that time, the world annihilation god would deal with Little Qing, while the primogenitors would deal with Shao Chun and the others. They would have a chance of winning. Hearing this, everyone nodded in agreement. It was decided. After the meeting, Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other ancient creatures found Xiao Zhu, Mu Zhu, and the others to ask about the situation. Knowing that Shao Chun and Little Qing were coming, Hu Huang and the others had heavy hearts. After all, they were all on the same boat now. It could be said that they were bound together for good or ill. If the origin world was defeated, then their fate would definitely not be good. Even the ancient creatures wouldn't be able to escape death. Little Qing wouldn't let them go. How is it? Do you have a solution? Hu Huang asked Xiao Zhu worriedly. In terms of strength, the origin world wasn't a match at all. Xiao Zhu smiled faintly when he saw Hu Huang's anxious expression. Don't worry. It's not impossible. We've been preparing for this for many years. How could we not have a solution? Although the development of the situation had exceeded the primogenitors' expectations, the problem was mainly Shao Chun and the others. However, it wasn't impossible for the primogenitors who had been preparing for many years. The world annihilation god was their last resort. Hu Huang didn't answer Xiao Zhu's question. He didn't know about the world annihilation god's existence, nor did he know what method the primogenitors had to stop the attack from the land of creation and the land of all life. It didn't seem possible at all. What about Little Qing? What about Shao Chun and the others? What about the ancient creatures? The primogenitors wouldn't be able to stop them alone. Could there be other experts in the origin world? However, Hu Huang couldn't ask these questions because there were many things he couldn't get involved in. Now, he could only choose to believe that the primogenitors really had a way to stop Shao Chun and Little Qing. As for Little Qing and Shao Chun, they didn't give the origin world too much time. 3 days later, from the land of all life and the land of creation, starships and space spirit boats flew out one after another and headed straight for the origin world. There weren't many people. Both sides added up to less than 100,000 people. However, their strength was extremely strong. In a group of less than 100,000 people, the weakest among them was at the ancestor realm. They didn't even have an emperor realm cultivator. Although they were few in number, such strength was enough to destroy the origin world. They didn't encounter any obstruction from the origin world along the way. Shao Chun and the others arrived at the origin world without a hitch. After meeting up with Little Qing, everyone looked at the empty starry sky in front of them. This was where the origin world used to be, but now it seemed to have completely disappeared. All they could see was a dark and endless starry sky. Little Qing sneered in response. You sealed the entire origin world. Do you think this will work? The origin world hadn't really disappeared. It had been completely sealed by the primogenitors. That was why they couldn't see the entire origin world. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2967. The primogenitors had sealed the entire origin world in an attempt to stop everyone's attack. However, Little Qing snorted disdainfully at the primogenitors' methods. In his opinion, the primogenitors were just trying to deceive themselves. It was impossible for them to stop the primogenitors with their current strength. Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others had the same thought. After all, based on the current situation, it was indeed very difficult to stop the primal origin world, and such methods were merely delaying for time. All right, there was no need to waste any more time with them. It was time to break the seal. Although the origin world had been completely sealed by the primogenitors, and it would take some time and effort to break it, it wasn't too difficult. It was just a matter of time. Little Qing, Shao Chun, Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yun, and Mo He, and Ancestor He soared into the sky. Each of them arrived at a certain range and attacked at the same time. Waves of spiritual energy bombarded the starry sky before them. For a time, a huge net seemed to appear in the empty starry sky. This net was the power that protected the origin world. Little Qing and the others attacked at the same time to break the net. His subordinates wouldn't be able to help much in this matter. Only Shao Qing, Shao Chun, and the others were powerful enough to break the seal on the origin realm. The others below them were conserving their strength for the upcoming battle. The primogenitors had naturally noticed little Qing and the others' actions, but they didn't stop them. Now wasn't the time to fight Xiao, Chun, and the others. The purpose of the seal was just to buy time. Therefore, Xiao, Chun, little Qing, and the others' actions were within the primogenitors' expectations. Everything was under their control. The primogenitors were calm, but Hu Huang and the other ancient living beings and the cultivators of the origin world couldn't be so calm. Ancestor Qiu, what should we do now? Are we just going to let them break the seal of the origin world? Hu Huang guessed that the seal of the origin world was the primogenitors' last resort. However, none of the progenitors were doing anything. Hu Huang couldn't help but feel anxious because once the seal was broken, the progenitors wouldn't be able to escape. If that was the case, the origin world would be exposed to Xiao Chun and the others. However, it was still able to stop Xiao Chun's attack. He could have charged straight in, and at that time, he would have been completely crushed. Facing Hu Huang's anxiousness, Qiu said indifferently, "Don't worry, everything is still under control." Qiu, just tell me the truth. What other tricks do you have up your sleeves? That way, I'll know what to do. All along, the primogenitor's calmness had puzzled Hu Huang. He always felt that they had some sort of backup plan, but he didn't know what it was. He'd originally thought that the origin world's Ning Jing had used her full strength to cast the seal, but now it seemed like the seal wasn't the primogenitor's final trump card. If that was the case, what would the primogenitors rely on in the end? Hu Huang couldn't help but feel a little anxious because of his lack of confidence. Qiu still said indifferently, "You'll know when the time comes." The existence of the world annihilation god was the biggest secret to the primogenitors. Moreover, such a method could be called a taboo in the entire world. After all, using the power of death was already a crime against the world. If it was exposed in advance, it would probably cause a huge commotion. This was a taboo power, a power that everyone could come into contact with. Even Hu Huang and the others would feel conflicted about such a power if they knew about it. In order to win the final victory, the primogenitors were really going all out. There was no bottom line at all. Everything was for the sake of victory, for the sake of taking down the land of all life and the land of creation. Without answering Hu Huang's question, Xiao Chun and the others continued to break the origin world seal for a period of time. As Xiao Chun and the others attacked, the origin world seal became weaker and weaker as time passed. It looked like it would shatter at any time. After more than 20 days, they were getting closer to attacking the origin world. As long as the seal was broken, Xiao Chun and the others would be able to attack the origin world in one fell swoop. At that time, they would be able to have a final battle with the origin world and completely end the war in this world, returning peace to the world. Victory seemed to be right in front of them. Not only Xiao Chun and the others, but even Xin Yuanling, Long Qing, Lin Yuan, and the others were feeling the same. After so many years of war, everything was finally coming to an end. Everyone was looking forward to it. The outcome would depend on this final battle. Compared to Xiao Chun and the others' anticipation, the primogenitors were still calm and didn't react at all. It was as if they had already surrendered. On this day, the primogenitors arrived at the small world where the world annihilation god resided. At that moment, the small world's red light spot had expanded many times. Moreover, waves of dense death aura were constantly spewing out. This was the power of the world annihilation god. The primogenitors had single-handedly created a monster that could destroy a world. Looking at the red light spot in front of them, even the primogenitors had a solemn expression. It should be soon. It will be in 2 days. Yes, I reckon the seal won't last for long. Fortunately, we made it in time. 2 days later, the red light spot in the small world suddenly exploded. Dense death aura engulfed the entire small world. Not only that, but even the origin world was completely devoured by the death aura. The flowers and trees instantly withered, and the white clouds in the sky turned into dark clouds. Everything seemed like the end of the world. Everyone in the origin world couldn't help but be bewildered by the sudden change. What happened? Why isn't there such a dense death aura? Facing such a sudden dense death aura, everyone was stunned because they had never felt such a dense death aura before. Even Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other ancient creatures felt a trace of fear from the depths of their hearts when they faced such a dense death aura. It should be known that they were ancient creatures. With their strength, there weren't many existences in this world that could make them feel fear with just their aura alone. Even if the primogenitors were slightly weaker, they wouldn't be able to make them feel fear with just a wisp of aura alone. Moreover, this fear couldn't be dispelled at all. In the entire world, only little Qing, as the spirit of heaven and earth, could do this. However, now, in the origin world, they truly felt such fear. It was a fear that came from the depths of their hearts. Please add, vote, recommend. Sword Master 8 Desolations error-free chapters will continue to be updated in the book pavilion. There will be no advertisements in the website. Please add and recommend the book pavilion. If you like Sword Master 8 Desolation, please add. Sword Master 8 Desolations book pavilion updates the fastest. Chapter 2968. Hu Huang and Chun Yin stood together. Their gazes were filled with doubt and seriousness as they looked at the horizon. At this moment, the sky of the origin world seemed to be covered by dark clouds. The thick aura of death shrouded everyone's heart. It made it difficult for people to even breathe. What a thick aura of death, Chun Yin said. I don't know where it came from. It should be related to the primogenitors. Hu Huang immediately guessed that the sudden appearance of the thick aura of death must have something to do with the primogenitors. Otherwise, it would not make sense. Moreover, as soon as the aura of death appeared, the primogenitors disappeared. Even Hu Huang and Chun Yin did not know where they had gone. However, where did the primogenitors get such a thick aura of death? What was the use of the aura of death? No creature would like the aura of death and the power of death. It was an instinctive feeling. This included ancient creatures like Hu Huang and Chun Yin. However, the primogenitors had used the power of disappointment. The two of them did not feel good. Most importantly, they did not know what the primogenitors wanted to do with the power. Chun Yin paused when he heard Hu Huang's words and then said in a low voice, "No matter what, we are in the same boat now. We can't stay out of this and we can't turn back." Chun Yin's words were obviously reminding Hu Huang that no matter how dissatisfied he was with the primogenitors, they were now completely part of the origin world. Since they had made a choice, they could only walk this path to the end. There was no other way. Even if they wanted to jump out of the origin world now, not to mention the primogenitors, even Little Qing and Xiao Chun would not agree. They were bound together for good or ill. I understand. However, the primogenitors have been feeling strange recently. They have been secretive about everything. That's why they have some guesses. In response, Hu Huang nodded and replied, "How could he not understand this logic? It's good that you understand. Moreover, no matter how you look at it, we are not really your trusted subordinates." Hu Huang felt uncomfortable that the primogenitors were hiding many things from him. In comparison, Chun Yin was much calmer. Although the ancient creatures were a rare fighting force to the origin world, frankly speaking, they were not the primogenitors. In the hearts of the primogenitors, they were still not on the same side. Therefore, even though the primogenitors treated them well, they didn't have much power when it came to the secrets of the primogenitors. He didn't even have the right to know. This was the sorrow of Hu Huang and Chun Yin. But what could they do? After all, they were not primogenitors. They sided each other. At the same time, the primogenitors had already appeared in the small world. A figure slowly emerged from the blood-red sphere. It had dark skin and a tall and muscular body. It had a pair of horns on its head and 9 wings on its back. This was the monster that the primogenitors had personally created, and they had named it Armageddon. This was because this guy really had the ability to destroy the world. Judging from its aura alone, it was no weaker than Shao Qing, the spirit of heaven and earth. So strong. Even Ancestor Mu could not help but say. Annihilation strength seemed to be much stronger than they had expected. Even though it was a monster that they had personally created, to be honest, the primogenitors were still uncertain. This was because annihilation had its own thoughts. It could be said that it was born after absorbing all the death energy in the world. It was obviously not an easy task to control such a monster. The primogenitors had not attempted to awaken it for so many years because they were worried about it. Otherwise, the primogenitors would have awakened annihilation long ago and taken the initiative to attack the land of creation. With annihilation's strength and the 8 primogenitors, it was indeed not something that Shao-Qing could resist. However, there were too many uncontrollable factors. This time, if it were not for the land of creation and the land of all living beings working together, the primogenitors would not have chosen to awaken annihilation. Everything was because they had no other choice. That was why the primogenitors had come to this point. The blood-red light slowly dissipated, and the entire space was still shrouded in dense death energy. Annihilation walked out of the blood-red light step by step. Following annihilation's actions, the primogenitors could not help but feel nervous. To be honest, the primogenitors had not felt nervous for many years. But now, facing the monster that they had personally created, the primogenitors were nervous. Soon, they saw annihilation's appearance clearly. At this moment, while the primogenitors were still in a daze, annihilation took the initiative to speak. His voice was filled with a strong sense of mockery. "Fathers, are you finally willing to awaken me?" Annihilation was created by the primogenitors, so there was no problem in calling him father, although he said that there was no trace of respect in his voice. That's right, Annihilation did not have any respect for the primogenitors. He had great power and was not afraid of any of them in a one-on-one battle. Hearing Annihilation's words, the primogenitors could not help but frown. The situation was somewhat different from what they had imagined. The moment Annihilation appeared, he did not seem to have a good impression of them. His tone was filled with mockery. "This is an urgent matter. Moreover, we are not enemies," Green Ancestor said. Now is not the time to be calculative. Although Annihilation had a good impression of them every day, now is not the time to dwell on it. Moreover, Annihilation had no choice but to form an alliance with them. After all, once the primogenitors were defeated, would Annihilation, who was born from the power of death, be able to survive? Shao Chun and Lil Qing would not let Annihilation go. Therefore, if Annihilation wanted to survive, he had to join forces with the primogenitor realm and the primogenitors. Upon hearing Qing Zhu's words, the corners of World Annihilation's mouth curled up, revealing an ugly and frightening smile. "Father, are you threatening me? But I don't like being threatened." Annihilation's figure flashed and appeared in front of Green Ancestor. His speed shocked the primogenitors. However, they reacted quickly and prepared to attack. At the same time, they shouted coldly, "What are you trying to do? Do you want to fight with us?" Annihilation's strength should be on par with Little Qing. Therefore, the primogenitors were not afraid of him when they attacked together. However, fighting with Annihilation was meaningless to the primogenitors. It was not something they wanted to see. After all, Annihilation was an ally of the primogenitor realm. His existence was to deal with Little Qing and Shao Chun, not to become their enemy. Please add, vote, recommend. Chapter 2969. The primogenitors frowned at World Destroyer's attitude. After all, they were the ones who created World Destroyer. It could be said that World Destroyer was indebted to the primogenitors. Moreover, World Destroyer had just been born. To put it bluntly, he had no grudges with the primogenitors. However, the primogenitors were infuriated by World Destroyer's tone. Of course, the primogenitors didn't expect World Destroyer to behave this way. It wasn't because he bore a grudge against the primogenitors, but because of his personality. He was born from the power of death in the world. World Destroyer could be said to have gathered all the darkest energy in the world. As such, World Destroyer couldn't be a righteous person. It was normal for him to have a dark heart and a violent and murderous personality. Therefore, World Destroyer didn't mean anything by what he said to the primogenitors. It was because of his personality. After being awakened, World Destroyer's first thought was to destroy everything. Since the primogenitors had appeared in front of him, World Destroyer naturally treated them as his targets. As for saying that the primogenitors were like World Destroyer's fathers, it wasn't a problem at all. Given World Destroyer's personality, he wouldn't kill his own father. World Destroyer didn't fully understand World Destroyer. Instead, he looked at the primogenitors with a mocking gaze. What? You want to see a show of father and son killing each other the moment I was born? You. The faces of the primal ancestors darkened, and they were enraged. World Destroyer didn't take them seriously at all. Seeing this, World Destroyer smiled even more happily. Just as the primogenitors thought that World Destroyer was about to attack, World Destroyer smiled faintly. All right, I can't beat all of you. It's no fun. However, I'm quite interested in what you said just now. Although World Destroyer had just been awakened, he wasn't a fool. He could determine the strength of the primogenitors through their auras. He could deal with 8 primogenitors. If there were only 2 or 3 primogenitors present, given Doomsday's personality, he might really attack. However, if there were 8 primogenitors, even if they attacked, both sides would suffer great losses. But after thinking about it, he decided to forget about it. There would be no result, and he would not be able to deal with it. Who would do that? It was true that he wanted to destroy the world, but he did not have the tendency to torture himself. Moreover, the primogenitors were his fathers in name. The primogenitors were enraged by World Destroyer's disregard for them. But now is obviously not the time for conflict. The most important thing to do was to unite against a common enemy. Moreover, since Armageddon wanted to talk, it was naturally for the best. The progenitors had the same intention. Soon, the primal ancestors and world annihilation arrived at the Great Hall of the Primal Origin World. This was the place where the primal ancestors usually discussed matters. He sat on the chair arrogantly and placed his feet on the table. Looking at World Destroyer's frivolous attitude, the primogenitors were unhappy. We have a common enemy. Now that the enemy has come knocking on our door, we need to work together to destroy the world. Qingzu suppressed the anger in his heart and spoke first. Oh, who is the enemy? Spirits of heaven and earth, and sacred ancestors of all beings. Sentient beings' divine ancestors were Shao, Chun, and the others. Their current strength had surpassed the ancient living beings, and they were respectfully called divine ancestors. Therefore, it was not a problem for them to submit to the title of sentient beings' divine ancestor. Spirits of heaven and earth, sentient beings' divine ancestor? Interesting. But looking at you, I don't think you are a match for them. Otherwise, you wouldn't have woken me up at this time. You have never had such thoughts for countless years. Isn't that right, my dear fathers? His words exposed the primogenitors' thoughts. The primogenitors did not answer. They did not want to admit it, but they could not refute because World Destroyer's words were true. Looking at the primogenitors' expressions, World Destroyer could not help but grin. Looks like I was right. World Destroyer, we are now in the same boat. Such an attitude will not do you any good. Ancestor Mu, who had the most explosive temper, could not stand World Destroyer's attitude and immediately shouted. Although it was indeed not the time to attack World Destroyer's repeated provocations were unbearable. It was indeed unbearable for the primogenitors. World Destroyer did not change his expression when he saw Ancestor Mu's anger. He continued to smile. Okay. Then let's talk. What do you want me to do? Destroy that group of people? You alone are not enough, Ancestor Qilin said faintly. Although World Destroyer was strong, he was at most on par with Heaven and Earth Spirit, Little Qing. World Destroyer alone could only deal with Little Qing. However, if Shao Chun and the others joined in, World Destroyer would lose without a doubt. Therefore, World Destroyer only had one mission, which was to stop Little Qing. After the primogenitors dealt with Shao Chun and the others, they would deal with Little Qing together. World Destroyer was interested when he heard the primogenitors' words. He had absorbed the darkest energy in the world, but it was still not enough to dominate the world. World Destroyer smiled curiously when he heard that he was not a match for Shao Chun and the others. Interesting. I didn't expect there to be so many strong people in this world. It seems like it won't be boring. While World Destroyer was recovering and they were talking, Xiao Chun, Little Qing, Lin Yun, and the others had finally broken the seal on the origin world after nearly a month. Seeing that the seal was getting weaker and weaker, the people in the land of creation and land of creation began to prepare. They looked at Xiao Chun and the others with excitement. Soon, at most, we will be able to break this seal in a few hours. The old tree said, "We don't need a few hours. I think we will succeed in an hour at most," Li Tian said. Li Tian definitely knew more about formations than Old Tree. Therefore, he believed that an hour was enough to break the seal on the origin world. As long as the seal was broken, they would be able to charge in and take down the origin world. As for the result of this battle, everyone was confident because they were very strong. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they could crush the origin world. However, they could not think of any way the origin world could make up for such a big gap in strength. Under everyone's gazes, as expected, the seal that had held them back for a month shattered. Numerous cracks appeared in the starry sky. These cracks were the sign that the seal was about to break. The seal has been broken. Immediately, everyone exclaimed in excitement. Please add, vote, recommend. Swordmaster 8 Desolation's error-free chapters will continue to be updated in the hand fighting bar. There are no advertisements in the hand fighting bar. Please add and recommend the hand fighting bar. If you like Swordmaster 8 Desolation, please add. Swordmaster 8 Desolation hand fighting bar updates the fastest. Chapter 2970. Now that the seal was broken, the origin world appeared before them once more. Now, they could head straight for the origin world. Now that the seal was broken, the origin world appeared before them once more. Now, they could head straight for the origin world. It took them nearly a month to break the seal of the origin world. Xiao Chun and the others looked at each other and smiled. Now, those old fellows don't even have their last obstacle, Little Qing said with a smile. Sealing the entire origin world was the primogenitor's last resort. In Little Qing's opinion, that was the case. Now that the seal was broken, what else did the primogenitors have left? Obviously, they had nothing left. Xiao Chun and the others didn't answer, but they all smiled. Without the seal, the rest would be easy. However, while they were talking, a strand of deathly aura shot into the sky from within the origin world. Moreover, numerous experts from the origin world flew out of the origin world. Soon, it appeared in front of everyone, blocking their way. The primogenitors obviously knew that the seal was broken, so they reacted immediately. Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other ancient creatures had appeared with the experts of the origin world. Obviously, they wanted to stop them from entering the origin world. Xiao Chun and the others weren't surprised. After all, the seal was broken, so they would have to fight sooner or later. You want to stop us with these stinky fishes and shrimps? Emohi sneered. Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other ancient creatures' faces turned cold. As ancient creatures, they were being called stinky fishes and shrimps. It was a blow to their self-esteem, but they couldn't refute it. After all, in Emohi's eyes, they were no match for him. Emohi had suddenly become an existence on the same level as the primogenitors. The current Emo, he was fully qualified to say such words. They looked coldly at Emohi. However, Xiao Chun, Little Qing, and the others didn't care about Hu Huang and the others. On the contrary, Xiao Chun and the others were more concerned about the waves of death aura coming from the origin world. Although Hu Huang and Chun Yin were ancient creatures, they weren't much of a threat to Xiao Chun and the others. Xiao Chun and the others didn't even need to do anything. Old Tree and Bee Slave were more than enough to deal with Hu Huang. What really made Xiao Chun and the others feel strange and nervous was the source of the death aura. This aura of death was extremely strong. It was strong to the point that even Xiao Chun and the others didn't dare be careless in the slightest. At the same time, they were puzzled as to where exactly this aura of death had come from. It's a bit strange, Lin Yun said faintly. She already felt a little strange. This death aura was completely different. Even Lin Yun felt her heart palpitate a little. They'd never underestimated the origin world because the primogenitors had many abilities and no one knew what other trump cards they possessed. The sudden appearance of this mysterious aura of death was indeed something that no one dared to underestimate. Looking at the origin world, Xiao Chun and the others watched as the primal ancestors finally showed up. Everyone already knew each other very well, so when they met, Little Qing's face instantly turned gloomy. At the same time, the murderous intent in her eyes was undisguised. Everyone knew that Little Qing was determined to kill the primogenitors. In addition, Little Qing was confident that she could get rid of the primogenitors this time. Therefore, there was nothing to hide. Murderous intent gushed out. The powerful murderous intent was like a wave that pounced on the primogenitors. The primogenitors didn't have much of an expression, and they still had cold smiles on their faces. Ancestor Qing said with a smile, "Spirit of heaven and earth, why are you so angry the moment you meet? Today will be the day you all die." Hearing that, Little Qing coldly snorted. As long as the primogenitors were killed, everything would be over. Ancestor Qing grinned in the face of Little Qing's murderous intent. Obviously, he wasn't affected. If they were nervous just because of Little Qing's words, the primogenitors wouldn't need to fight Little Qing. Little Qing wanted to kill the primogenitors, and vice versa. Instead of saying anything, Ancestor Mu looked at Xiao Chun and said nonchalantly, "Little Qing, what's the use of heaven and earth? Xiao Chun, what's the point of cooperating with the heaven and earth spirit? Come to my origin world. I can guarantee that as long as you kill Little Blue, you and I will be in charge of everything in this world." Ancestor Mu tried to rope Xiao Chun in. However, such a method was meaningless to Xiao Chun. After killing Little Qing, everything in this world would be decided by him and the primogenitors. That sounded good, but Xiao Chun didn't believe it at all. He smirked coldly. "Do the others agree with what you said? Also, do you think the person behind the death aura will agree?" From the moment the death aura appeared, Xiao Chun guessed that the primogenitors definitely had trump cards that they hadn't revealed yet. In addition, the primogenitors didn't look nervous at all when they appeared. It should be known that the primogenitors had no chance of winning against Little Qing and the others. Even so, they weren't nervous at all. If they hadn't lost their minds, then they had the confidence to not be afraid of them. Xiao Chun didn't think that the primogenitors had lost their minds. In that case, there was only one possibility. The primogenitors still had trump cards that could resist them. And this trump card was probably related to the death aura. After all, the death aura was so dense that even Little Qing didn't dare to underestimate it. There was a slight deviation in the situation, but Xiao Chun wasn't too surprised. Because all along, Xiao Chun didn't think that it would be easy to kill the primogenitors. There wasn't a reason, but it was instinctive. If it could be so easy to kill the primogenitors, then Little Qing and the primogenitors wouldn't have fought for so many years without a clear victor. Ancestor Mu smiled when he heard Xiao Chun's words. At the same time, World Annihilator's figure appeared directly beside the primogenitors. As World Annihilator appeared, the death aura enveloped the entire space. Everyone was taken aback, including the people from the origin world. Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the others were stunned as they looked at World Annihilator's back. Even though they were from the origin world, they had never seen World Annihilator before. They didn't even know that World Annihilator existed in the origin world. However, judging from his aura, World Annihilator's strength was probably above the primogenitors. Such a formidable existence had actually been hiding in the origin world all this time, and no one had noticed it. Naturally, everyone was shocked by this fact. Hu Huang stared coldly at World Annihilator and didn't know what to say. The death aura that suddenly appeared earlier should have come from him. Who was he? What did he have to do with the primogenitors? Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2971. The appearance of World Destroyer stunned everyone, including Hu Huang and the others. The appearance of World Destroyer stunned everyone, including Hu Huang and the others. Previously, the origin world had been shrouded by a dense death aura. It was extremely sudden and there was no sign at all. Hu Huang and the others had some doubts about the death aura at first, but they understood everything after seeing World Destroyer. This deathly aura obviously came from world annihilation. They had never imagined that such a powerful figure was hiding in the origin world. However, the power of death caused everyone to frown. This was because it had indeed touched upon a taboo. Compared to the others, little Qing naturally knew more. As a spirit of heaven and earth, she understood very well. It was impossible for the power of death to give birth to life on its own. The rules have been set since the beginning of heaven and earth. Although the power of death was strong, it couldn't survive in heaven and earth and would soon vanish. Therefore, there was only one possibility for World Destroyer's appearance. Someone had artificially gathered the power of death between heaven and earth and created a monster like World Destroyer. Moreover, judging from World Destroyer's aura, the amount of power of death he had absorbed wasn't small. It would take a very long time to gather so much power of death. It wasn't something that could be done in a few hundred or even a few thousand years. In other words, the primogenitors had been preparing for this since a long time ago. How dare you touch the taboo power? Little Qing shouted coldly as she looked at the primogenitors angrily. They even dared to touch the power of death. The primogenitors' actions had infuriated little Qing. She had thought that these old fellows had no bottom line. However, it seemed that she had underestimated them. It wasn't a matter of bottom line at all. The primogenitors knew very well what it meant to create a monster like World Destroyer. It would definitely bring a devastating disaster to heaven and earth. Moreover, could the primogenitors control such a monster? Being born from the power of death, little Qing knew how unruly World Destroyer's personality was. To put it bluntly, this guy existed to destroy. It wasn't that he wanted to, but he instinctively wanted to destroy everything. The primogenitors couldn't control him, but they had created him. In little Qing's eyes, World Destroyer was more threatening than the primogenitors. Because if this guy was left alone, the entire world would be destroyed by his hands. What's wrong? Seeing little Qing's furious look, Xiao Chun asked curiously. Xiao Chun didn't fully understand the Armageddon and only knew that he was strong. Little Qing gritted her teeth and said, "These old fellows have gone completely crazy. They don't even have a bottom line. That Armageddon was created by them, but those old fogies couldn't control it at all. The primogenitors couldn't control the destruction of the world." Xiao Chun and the others were stunned when they heard that. However, that wasn't enough to make little Qing's expression change so drastically. However, what little Qing said next caused Xiao Chun and the others to be completely stunned. If the ultimate goal of the progenitors is to control the world, then this monster's ultimate goal is to destroy everything. This is his nature. One was control, and the other was destruction. In that case, it was self-evident who was the greater threat. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and the others finally understood why little Qing had such a huge reaction. At the same time, they looked at World Destroyer with a trace of murderous intent. If what little Qing said was true, then no matter what, they couldn't let World Destroyer live. Otherwise, the entire world would suffer another calamity because of him, a calamity that was even more terrifying than before. Sensing that everyone's eyes were on him, the terrifying World Destroyer wasn't nervous at all. On the contrary, he said excitedly, "TSK, TSK. I just woke up, and I'm already the public enemy of the world? Spirit of heaven and earth, are you trying to get rid of me?" At the end of his sentence, World Destroyer looked at little Qing with a mocking look in his eyes. It was as though World Destroyer wasn't worried at all about little Qing's murderous intent. Instead, he felt that little Qing didn't have the ability to kill him. After hearing World Destroyer's words, the murderous intent in little Qing's eyes intensified. This was a monster born from the power of death. It couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as ordinary beings. To put it bluntly, World Destroyer's existence was the accumulation of all the negative energy in the world. This guy had to die. Little Qing had already made up her mind. Even if she couldn't get rid of the primogenitors, she had to get rid of World Destroyer. He was an existence that could destroy the world, and he was much more dangerous than the primogenitors. Seeing that Little Ching didn't reply to him, World Destroyer shook his head in boredom. Then, without any warning, World Destroyer flashed. He was so fast that even Xiao Chun and the rest couldn't react in time. In a flash, he appeared in front of Little Ching and punched Little Ching in the stomach. In an instant, Little Ching was sent flying like a cannonball. "Ha! If I kill the spirit of heaven and earth, won't I be the master of this world?" He laughed loudly. No one expected World Destroyer to make the first move, and it was so sudden. However, from this punch, World Destroyer's strength was fully displayed. He had surpassed the primogenitors in Xiao Chun and was comparable to Xiao Qing. The punch hit its target. Of course, Little Qing wasn't hurt by this punch. She was just a little embarrassed. After stabilizing herself, Little Qing looked at World Annihilation with a cold expression. World Annihilation sneered. "Father, I've helped you get rid of the World Lord, and that's considered repaying your kindness. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other." Then, without waiting for the primogenitors to reply, World Destroyer leaped up and engaged in a fierce battle with Little Qing. Looking at the situation, it was indeed difficult for the primogenitors to control World Destroyer. It could even be said that World Destroyer didn't listen to the primogenitors at all. In this regard, the primogenitors didn't say much as they already knew about it. Moreover, if World Destroyer could really kill Little Qing, it was exactly what the primogenitors wanted. "Is this your trump card? You've created such a monster? In order to win, you don't care about anything?" At the same time, Xiao Qin looked at the primogenitors coldly. In response to Xiao Qin's question, Ancestor Mu said in a deep voice, "We can't lose. As long as we can win, we're willing to use any means." Just because they wanted to win, they didn't even have a bottom line. Hearing that, Xiao Chun said coldly, "Even if we win, what's the point? When the time comes, can you get rid of this monster?" Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2972. The primogenitors wanted to win, so they created a monster like Armageddon. To Xiao Chun, it was the stupidest choice. Even if they won in the end, how would they deal with Armageddon? Looking at Armageddon, who was fighting with Little Green, his strength definitely surpassed the primogenitors. After all, the primogenitors didn't have the ability to fight Little Green one-on-one, but Armageddon could. Furthermore, he wasn't at a disadvantage in front of Little Green. The two of them fought back and forth, and Little Green couldn't take down Armageddon in a short time. Such a powerful, tyrannical, and uncontrollable existence. How did the primogenitors plan to deal with it after creating it? Who would deal with Armageddon? Could the primogenitors deal with an existence like Armageddon? Facing Xiao Qin's question, Ancestor Mu replied coldly, "That's a matter for the future. Now, we just need to defeat you." How could the primogenitors not have thought of what Xiao Qin said? But what could they do? Did they have any other choice? Obviously not. Without Armageddon's power, the origin world wasn't a match for the land of creation and the land of all beings. Therefore, the primogenitors could only choose Armageddon. Only then would they have the power to fight. They were completely crazy. This was no longer a matter of using unscrupulous means to win. They would only make such a choice if they lost their minds. It was simply a joke. When the time came, Armageddon would really become the most difficult problem in the world. When that time came, the primogenitors would probably regret their decision today. However, it was meaningless to talk about it now, because Armageddon had awakened. Judging from his appearance, he obviously wouldn't listen to anyone. Even the primogenitors who created him couldn't order him to do anything. To put it simply, Armageddon and the primogenitors were using each other because they had a common enemy. The primogenitors borrowed Armageddon's power, and Armageddon borrowed the primogenitors' power. Armageddon wasn't stupid. He knew that without the primogenitors, he would very likely be killed. Because Little Green wouldn't allow Armageddon to exist, Armageddon could only choose to ally with the primogenitors. However, once the threat of Little Qing and Xiao Chun was dealt with, would the Armageddon Society continue to cooperate with the primogenitors? When the time came, he would probably be the first to attack the primogenitors. There was no doubt about that. Hee. The spirit of heaven and earth is only SOSO. It's weaker than I thought. After a fierce battle with Little Ching, Armageddon did not gain any advantage, but neither did he suffer any losses. Both sides should be evenly matched. Hearing Armageddon's words, Little Green's face turned gloomy. This guy was stronger than the primogenitors, and he posed a greater threat. Little Ching's eyes were brimming with killing intent. She did not reply. Instead, she pointed her finger, and a cyan light instantly shot towards Doomsday. Such an attack could easily destroy a continent. Little Ching did not hold back at all. However, such a powerful attack was shattered by a single punch from the World Destroyer. Little Ching's attack was not unstoppable for Great Era Destroyer. Up until now, Great Era Destroyer had not suffered any injuries. His body was surrounded by a dense, deathly aura. The deathly aura seemed to be unbearable even for the space. The space around Great Era Destroyer continued to shrink. It was as if he did not belong to this world, but appeared from another dimension. After shattering Little Ching's attack with a punch, Great Era Destroyer grinned. He then pointed his finger, and a black light flashed. The space collapsed inch by inch like a fragile piece of paper. Under Great Era Destroyer's attack, the space became extremely fragile in an instant. Moreover, the black light carried a dense, deathly aura. It could easily devour and destroy all life. If an ordinary warrior came into contact with it, he would probably be killed on the spot. In response, Little Ching did not dare to be careless. A cyan barrier appeared around her, and the black light hit the barrier hard. After the two sides collided, the black light slowly dissipated. Their attacks did not seem to be able to hurt each other, but Great Era Destroyer was not upset at all. After all, Little Ching was the spirit of heaven and earth. It would be strange if she could be defeated so easily. After attacking each other for a while, Little Ching took the initiative. She took a step forward and appeared in front of Great Era Destroyer in an instant. She threw out a punch as fast as lightning. The power was so great that the space collapsed inch by inch. Seeing that Little Ching's attack was coming, Great Era Destroyer raised his hand to block it. From an outsider's perspective, it looked as if the two of them had just exchanged blows. However, in fact, in the blink of an eye, Little Ching and Great Era Destroyer had already exchanged hundreds of blows. Their speed was extremely fast. Hence, from an outsider's perspective, it looked as if the two of them had only exchanged one round of blows. After hundreds of blows, Little Ching and Great Era Destroyer did not gain any advantage. They had already used 120% of their strength, but they were still unable to suppress Great Era Destroyer. The only ones who could see their movements clearly were Xiao Chun and the primogenitors. While the two of them were fighting, Xiao Chun and Lin Yan looked at each other. It was obvious that Little Ching alone would not be able to suppress Great Era Destroyer. Hence, Xiao Chun and the rest decided to help. Only by gathering everyone's strength would they be able to suppress Great Era Destroyer. However, just as Xiao Chun and the rest were about to attack Great Era Destroyer together with Little Ching, the primogenitors also made their move. Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Chiu blocked Xiao Chun. Ancestor Lin and Ancestor Bai blocked Lin Yan. The other four primogenitors blocked Dong Fong Yun, Mo He, Ancestor He, and Mu Lingxian. Xiao Chun said coldly after being blocked by Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Chiu, "Are you really unrepentant? Since you've already made your decision, there's no way for you to regret it. No matter what, we won't let you attack Great Era Destroyer. You'll regret it sooner or later. Who knows? Maybe there'll be a turn for the better in the future." In fact, the primogenitors had already thought of everything. The Sector Lord would use Great Era Destroyer's power to defeat Little Ching and Xiao Chun. At that time, the primogenitors will be able to absorb Little Ching's power. Since they were of the same origin, only the primogenitors would be able to absorb Little Ching's power. Great Era Destroyer and Xiao Chun would not be able to control the power of the Heaven and Earth Spirit. At that time, the primogenitors who had absorbed Little Ching's power would be stronger than they were now. At that time, There would be no other threats, and the primogenitors would be able to attack Great Era Destroyer. They believed that at that time, the primogenitors would be able to suppress Great Era Destroyer. Hence, they were not too worried about the trouble that Xiao Chun had mentioned. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2973. The primogenitors had considered everything. Although it was difficult to defeat Apocalypse, they only needed to defeat Xiao Chun and the rest. After absorbing Little Qing's power, the primogenitor's strength would definitely increase tremendously. By then, they would be able to suppress Apocalypse. Because of that, the primogenitors chose to awaken Apocalypse. Otherwise, even if they wanted to win, they couldn't awaken a monster that they couldn't control or deal with. The primogenitors had their own plans. However, in order to achieve that, they first had to defeat Xiao Chun and the rest, as well as Little Qing. Otherwise, all of this would just be empty talk. However, if they couldn't defeat Xiao Chun and Little Qing, the primogenitors wouldn't care about anything else. This was because the only outcome that awaited them was death. If that really happened, would the primogenitors still care about how Apocalypse would deal with it? With that thought, the primogenitors naturally couldn't let Xiao Chun and the rest join forces to deal with Apocalypse. Apocalypse might be able to fight Little Qing one-on-one, but if Xiao Chun and the rest joined forces, Apocalypse might not be a match for them. This was because Xiao Chun and the rest's current strength couldn't be underestimated, especially Xiao Chun and Lin Yan. Their strength was above the primogenitors. Seeing that the primogenitors had no intention of retreating, it was obvious that they were on Apocalypse's side and were determined to go against them. Xiao Chun didn't say anything else. He faced Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu and took the initiative to attack. Ancestor Mu didn't retreat in the face of Xiao Chun's attack. He also threw out a punch, and the two fists collided. However, the result was completely different from before. Ancestor Mu's figure was blasted far away. It was obvious that Xiao Chun had the upper hand in the first exchange. After being blasted back, Ancestor Mu's expression turned ugly. He recalled the battle with Xiao Chun. Even though Xiao Chun had become an ancient life form, he was still suppressed by Ancestor Mu. But now, after obtaining the power of living beings, Xiao Chun's strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he had already surpassed Ancestor Mu. Judging from that punch just now, Ancestor Mu was no longer Xiao Chun's match. If he were to fight Xiao Chun one-on-one, he would have no chance of winning at all. Such an outcome made Patriarch Mu feel extremely aggrieved. All this time, Xiao Chun's growth had exceeded the primogenitor's expectations. In the beginning, he had been an existence that could be casually crushed. Later on, with Little Qing's help, he had broken through to become an ancient life form, and now he had surpassed the various primogenitors. All of this was still fresh in Patriarch Mu's mind, and he found it hard to accept. Just like every time he saw Xiao Chun, this guy would reach a new height, and his strength would continue to climb crazily. Logically speaking, for someone of Xiao Chun's bloodline, being able to cultivate to the level of a world lord was already the limit. Not to mention anything else. Even breaking through to become an ancient era's life form was impossible. However, Xiao Chun did it and really broke through to become an ancient era's life form. That was not all. Now he had transformed into an existence that was even stronger than the various primogenitors. His strength was no longer comparable to Xiao Chun's, and Patriarch Mu found it hard to accept the reality for a while. However, there was no other way. Whether Patriarch Mu was willing to admit it or not, the truth was that Xiao Chun was indeed stronger than him. Not only Patriarch Mu, but Patriarch Qiu also had a complicated expression. Among the various primogenitors, Patriarch Qiu was probably the only one that Xiao Chun had a good impression of. After all, Patriarch Qiu had given them a way out back then. Otherwise, Xiao Chun and the others might not have been able to escape unscathed when Patriarch Qiu attacked that time. After sending Patriarch Mu flying, Xiao Chun's gaze fell on Patriarch Qiu. He knew that Patriarch Chio did not agree with the creation of a new world, and he did not expect things to develop to this point. Step by step, the situation had completely gone beyond the various primogenitors' control. The two of them looked at each other, and Xiao Chun said calmly, "Patriarch Chio, it's not too late to stop now. Everything is completely different now. This is not what you planned, and the situation is not something that you can continue to control. If you persist blindly, you will only go berserk in the end. It won't do anyone any good." Xiao Chun did not say anything about letting Patriarch Chio go because it was impossible. At this point, the only thing Xiao Chun could tell Chio Zhu was that he should stop being so stubborn because everything had changed. Continuing to be stubborn would not do anyone any good. The various primogenitors were no longer in control of everything. This was probably the opposite of their initial plan. In that case, why should they continue to be stubborn? Wouldn't it be better to put an end to everything? Patriarch Chio smiled bitterly when he heard Xiao Chen's words. Now that things have developed to this point, we have no way out. Patriarch Chio did not choose to listen to Xiao Chen's advice. At the same time, he looked at Xiao Chun with an extremely complicated gaze. Patriarch Chio could empathize with Xiao Chen's growth and improvement the most. He also lamented the impermanence of the world. Even someone as strong as the various primogenitors could not control everything. After the establishment of the new world, Patriarch Chio had felt that the situation was out of his control many times and that he was deeply powerless. Everything had been planned, and there should not have been so much resistance. However, things were completely different from what they had imagined. The various primogenitors simply could not completely control the development of the situation. Among them, Xiao Chun was the most difficult to control. There was no way to control him at all. Xiao Chun sighed helplessly when he heard Patriarch Chio's words. Even now, the various primogenitors still had no intention of giving up. Xiao Chun also knew that continuing to persuade them would be of no use. "Then let's do it," he said softly. Since he could not persuade them, he naturally had to do it. After saying that, without waiting for Patriarch Chio's reply, Xiao Chun took a step forward, appeared in front of Patriarch Chio in an instant, and blasted out a punch. Patriarch Chio reacted immediately in the face of Xiao Chen's attack. At the same time, Patriarch Mu also stepped forward. Even though they were unwilling, Patriarch Mu and Patriarch Chio had to admit that they were no match for Xiao Chun one-on-one. If they wanted to fight Xiao Chun, they could only join forces. Therefore, Patriarch Mu and Patriarch Chio joined forces to contend with Xiao Chun and engaged in a fierce battle with Xiao Chun. While Xiao Chun was engaged in a fierce battle with Patriarch Chio and Patriarch Mu, on the other side, Lin Yun, Mo He, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yun, and Patriarch He were also engaged in a fierce battle with the various primogenitors. Lin Yun was also engaged in a fierce battle with two primogenitors, while Mu Lingxian, Mo He, and the others were dealing with the other primogenitors. When the battle broke out, many martialists from both sides also broke out into a battle. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2974. A great battle broke out between the two sides. In terms of numbers, it was obvious that the origin world had more people. There were almost 1 million of them. On the other hand, the land of living beings and the land of creation had less than 100,000 people. Moreover, 1 million cultivators wasn't the limit of the origin world. Therefore, the land of living beings and the land of creation didn't have any advantage in terms of numbers. However, this was only on the surface. The difference in numbers was huge, but the quality couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. The lowest cultivation base of the 100,000 people from the land of living beings and the land of creation was at the progenitor realm. This was ridiculous. Therefore, even though there seemed to be a huge disparity in numbers between the two sides after a head-on clash, what was unexpected was that the 100,000 people from the land of all living beings and the land of creation actually occupied both. The 100,000 people who seemed to be at an absolute disadvantage were like a sharp knife that stabbed into the Origin World's army. The Origin World's army was in a complete mess. Even though the origin world's new cultivators didn't have emotions and desires, they didn't fear fear or fear. They didn't know what fear was, and they didn't know how to run. However, they still couldn't stop the 100,000 martial artists from the land of living beings and the land of creation. The primogenitors and the world destroyer were pinned down. Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other two ancient creatures naturally became the leaders of the origin world. Even Hu Huang and Chun Yin's expressions turned ugly when they saw this scene. They had never thought that the battle would be so one-sided as soon as it began. The lowest cultivation base of the 100,000 cultivators is at the progenitor realm. Hu Huang said with a gloomy expression. Chun Yin didn't say anything when he heard this. However, he also felt a huge pressure in his heart. This wasn't a gap that could be made up with numbers. Who knew where the land of living beings and the land of creation had gotten so many progenitor realm experts? There weren't many progenitor realm experts, even in the greater cosmos. However, 100,000 of them had appeared at the same time. What Hu Huang and Chun Yin did not know was that the spirit chi and the laws of heaven and earth in the land of all living beings that Xiao Chun and the others had created were far superior to those of the other universes. It was like the ancient creatures who had received the blessings of heaven and earth at the beginning of the world. As the first batch of living beings to appear in this world, they naturally had their own blessings. It was the same for the cultivators in the land of living beings. As the first batch of people to enter the land of living beings, they were just like the many primordial beings from the beginning of the world. He had gained unexpected benefits. When the land of all living beings was established, everyone had made a breakthrough in their cultivation. Moreover, if it wasn't for the lack of origin energy, not to mention ancestor realm experts, even world lord level experts would have emerged in large numbers. Of course, there was no way to break through this restriction. Without the origin energy, no matter how heaven-defying one's talent was, it was impossible to break through to become a world lord. Therefore, many people could only stop at the ancestor realm in the end. Even so, the strength of the land of living beings and the land of creation was enough to make one blush with shame. Compared to half a year ago, his strength had increased by who knew how many times, and this was also what gave Hu Huang and Chun Yin a headache. They had fallen into an absolute disadvantage right from the start. Unfortunately, Hu Huang and the others had no way to interfere because the beast slaves, Sure Song, Old Tree, and the other ancient creatures had already come knocking on their door. In addition to the huge difference in strength between the cultivators below, the origin world had also fallen into an absolute disadvantage in terms of the number of ancient creatures. Although this was something he knew from the beginning, when he was really surrounded by the beast slaves and the others, Hu Huang's face was still extremely gloomy. The beast slaves, Sure Song, and Mu Ling blocked Hu Huang's path, facing three ancient creatures at the same time. Hu Huang's heart sank. Not to mention him, even the primogenitors would feel pressured if they were to face three ancient creatures alone. It was not like there was no precedent. Remember the primordial universe back then? Ancestor Mu personally went to hunt down Xiao Chun and the others. But in the end, the beast slaves, Sure Song, and Mu Ling were the only ones left. In the end, it was futile. Even the primogenitor had no choice but to retreat when faced with the combined might of the three ancient creatures, let alone Hu Huang. Compared to Hu Huang's helplessness and pressure, the beast slaves and the others seemed very relaxed. Hu Huang, surrender. You don't have a chance in this battle. 3 against 1, there was no reason to lose, so the beast slaves and the others were not in a hurry to make a move. Moreover, if he could persuade Hu Huang to surrender, it would indeed be the best outcome. In any case, Little Qing only had to kill the primogenitors. If Hu Huang was willing to surrender, he should be able to keep his life. Humph, cut the crap. If you want to fight, let's fight. Sigh, stubborn. Beast slaves, there's no need to say more. Let's fight. Sure Song shook his head and signaled the beast slaves to stop talking. Since Hu Huang was unwilling to surrender, they could only fight. The beast slaves did not object. It was the truth. If Hu Huang did not surrender, they would fight. If they could capture him alive, they would capture him alive and hand him over to Xiao Chun and Little Qing to deal with. While the two sides were engaged in a fierce battle, on the other side, the battle between Xiao Chun, Ancestor Mu, and Ancestor Qiu had reached its climax. To be honest, the two primogenitors had mixed feelings about the battle with Xiao Chun. In a short period of time, Xiao Chun had grown to such a level that the two primogenitors had to work together to fight against him. Moreover, they did not have much of an advantage over him. There is no doubt that if it was a one-on-one battle, even their primogenitors would have been defeated. Even if they could still hold on, they would definitely be suppressed. No matter how unwilling they were, they had to admit that Xiao Chun had surpassed them. They had mixed feelings, but they had no choice but to accept it. On the other hand, Xiao Chun was fighting back and forth with the two primogenitors. However, Xiao Chun was not in the mood to think about that. Fighting with Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu was not Xiao Chun's goal. What Xiao Chun really wanted to do was to get rid of Armageddon. However, the two primogenitors did not listen to him at all. Moreover, Xiao Chun could not defeat them in a short period of time. Xiao Chun was confident that he could deal with one primogenitor, but the situation was different when he had to face two primogenitors at the same time. Both sides were evenly matched, and no one had any good ideas. This is what made Xiao Chun depressed the most. He clearly did not want to be entangled with the two primogenitors, but he could not get away. Was this not infuriating? Ancestor Qiu, Ancestor Mu, is this really meaningful? Let go. That guy is not someone you can control. His existence will only bring disaster to the world. When the time comes, even if you win, you will not be able to gain control of the world. Xiao Chun said as he attacked. He hoped that the two primogenitors would be able to pull back from the brink. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 2975. Xiao Chun fought fiercely with Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu. With the two old fellows in the way, it would be difficult to resolve the situation quickly. Xiao Chun fought fiercely with Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu. With the two old fellows in the way, it would be difficult to resolve the situation quickly. Little Qing could only rely on herself to deal with Armageddon. However, judging from the current situation, Little Qing did not seem to be in a good condition. He hoped that Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu could pull back from the precipice. After all, Armageddon's existence was not beneficial to anyone. Unfortunately, Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu did not listen to Xiao Chun's advice at all. At this point, the primogenitors had already reached the end of the road. There was no possibility of turning back. Moreover, Xiao Chun knew that even if the primogenitors were willing to stop, they would not have any chance of survival. As such, it was naturally more difficult for Xiao Chun to persuade the primogenitors. Both sides could only fight to the death. The sudden appearance of Armageddon made Xiao Chun sigh. The origin world still had endless tricks up its sleeves. Victory was in their grasp. Who would have thought that the primogenitors would create such a monster? To be honest, if Armageddon did not exist, the outcome of this battle would have been decided long ago. It was impossible for the origin world to win. However, after Armageddon appeared, everything changed. At least, Little Qing was perfectly restrained. With Armageddon's interference, Little Qing could not free herself to attack the primogenitors. Just like now, Xiao Chun was caught in a fierce battle. Little Qing and Armageddon were in the same situation. The two of them had been fighting fiercely for a long time, but there was still no sign of a victor. It was not even clear which side had the upper hand. Armageddon's appearance was like Little Qing's natural enemy. One was the spirit of heaven and earth, while the other was an existence that destroyed everything. Their powers were completely different. It was like fire and water. As a spirit of heaven and earth, is this all you've got? Armageddon smirked coldly after colliding with Little Qing's fist. His eyes were full of disdain, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. Little Qing did not reply. She only snorted coldly. At the same time, the green light around her body brightened. His expression was incomparably cold and fierce, as if he was going to fight to the death with the world. As a spirit of heaven and earth, little Ching had never shown such an expression before. In front of the mask of world destruction, he had met his match. In a one-on-one situation, the opponent was actually able to perfectly block him and not be at a disadvantage at all. If this guy didn't die, he would be a huge threat to the entire world. Therefore, Lil Ching had long since aroused killing intent. He slowly stretched out his hand. In the sky above, a huge palm print pressed down, heading straight for Armageddon. This hand seemed to want to suppress him directly. It was like a continent. Such a huge spiritual energy palm made it impossible for anyone to escape. However, Armageddon didn't seem to be worried at all. He sneered at Little Ching's attack. This was definitely Little Ching's strongest attack. Faced with this attack, Xiao Chun naturally sensed it immediately. Knowing that Little Blue was going all out, Xiao Chun did not think too much about it. There was no doubt about the power of this attack. Once the warriors in the land of all living beings and the land of creation were affected, they would all die. With their strength, they would definitely end up with nothing left of their bodies. Even someone as strong as the beast slave and an ancient creature like Sher Song would not be able to block this attack. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, the warriors in the surroundings immediately scattered in all directions. They did not dare to challenge Little Ching's attack. What a joke! If this attack landed and they did not retreat in time, one could imagine the consequences. Soon, Little Ching and the warriors around Armageddon all retreated. As for Armageddon, in the face of Little Ching's attack, he stood indifferently on the spot and watched the huge palm pressing down on him. There was even a faint sneer at the corner of his mouth, as if he was not worried about Little Ching's attack at all. You want to suppress me with this? Spirit of heaven and earth, you are too naive. As he spoke, the giant palm suddenly fell, and Armageddon punched the giant palm that was descending from the sky. The fist and the palm collided. To everyone's surprise, Little Ching's all-out attack was blocked by Armageddon. The moment the huge palm and Armageddon's fist collided, the huge palm could no longer descend. It was blocked by Armageddon and could not be suppressed successfully. In response, Little Ching snorted coldly. Go to hell. As she spoke, she exerted more strength in her hand. The power of the huge palm increased again, and Armageddon also went all out. The two sides were in a stalemate. The power of both sides was like a gust of wind, and neither side was willing to give way. As time passed, cracks began to appear on the huge palm, and blood began to flow from the corner of Little Ching's mouth. On the other hand, Armageddon did not have it easy either. Even he had to take Little Ching's all-out attack seriously, and he could not afford to be careless. Blood also flowed from the corner of his mouth. The two of them were in a stalemate, and they exerted all their strength to collide. In the end, under everyone's gaze, the huge palm suddenly exploded. The powerful force directly sent both Little Ching and Armageddon flying. This time, Little Ching was obviously injured. After all, she had gone all out and did not hold back. Such a head-on collision would inevitably cause her to suffer a backlash. She spat out a mouthful of blood. This was the first time Little Ching was injured. It was the same for Armageddon. In order to block Little Ching's attack, Armageddon looked relaxed on the surface. In fact, he was not feeling well. The blood in his body was surging, and the thick, deathly aura around him was dispersed. As for the head-on collision, it could be said that both of them were injured. Such an outcome was indeed somewhat unexpected. Seeing this, Xiao Chun shook his head helplessly. Little Ching alone was indeed not enough. From this head-on collision, it was not difficult to see that it was impossible for Little Ching to deal with Armageddon alone. Both of them were injured, and Little Ching probably could not defeat Armageddon. She could only rely on the strength of others. Of course, Armageddon could not kill Little Ching directly. Both of them were entangled, but this was not the outcome that Xiao Chun and the others wanted. This time, they had launched an attack on the origin world in order to settle the situation and end the chaos in this world. However, they were now stuck in a quagmire again, and neither of them could do anything about it. This was completely different from what they had expected. Xiao Chun did not want this battle to fall into a stalemate and continue endlessly. However, judging from the current situation, it seemed that there was no other way. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 2976. Originally, he wanted to end this final battle as quickly as possible and bring true peace to the entire world. However, Armageddon's appearance had caused things to spiral out of their control. For a time, the primogenitors had the capital to continue fighting. Xiao Chun looked coldly at Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu. He didn't say anything because it was useless to say anything now. It was impossible to make Ancestor Qiu and Ancestor Mu surrender. Xiao Chun had said that before. However, it was impossible for them to surrender. If they were really willing to surrender, the primogenitors wouldn't have created a monster like Armageddon. They had created Armageddon to fight to the death with the land of beings and the land of creation. Little Qing, who was injured, was still fighting fiercely with Armageddon. However, Armageddon, who was also injured, had no intention of retreating. It was as though his injuries didn't make him afraid. Instead, they made him extremely excited. Judging from their attacks, Little Qing and Armageddon's attacks were much more violent and intense than before. Xiao Chun couldn't help Little Qing. Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu had also seen the scene earlier. The two primogenitors weren't too surprised by this outcome. Everything was within their expectations. The primogenitors were undoubtedly the ones who understood Little Qing's strength the most. They were from the same lineage and understood Little Qing too well. Therefore, after comparing Little Qing's strength with Armageddon's, the primogenitors had come to the conclusion that Armageddon couldn't defeat Little Qing. Similarly, Little Qing couldn't defeat Armageddon. The two of them were evenly matched and could only continue to be entangled like this. Judging from the current situation, that was indeed the case. The only problem now was the numerous cultivators below. This was because the cultivators of the origin world couldn't stop the cultivators of the land of beings and the land of creation. The difference in strength between the two sides was too great. Even if they had an absolute advantage in numbers, they couldn't make up for it. Moreover, although the origin world had mastered the technique of resurrection, it still required a process. It was impossible to say that a person could be resurrected immediately after death. It required time. Now that the battle had erupted, the speed at which the cultivators of the origin world were dying was astounding. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before the 1 million cultivators of the origin world perished. This was the only advantage that Xiao Chun's group had right now. Xiao Chun had naturally noticed this as well. He couldn't help but have an idea in his mind. If the battle below could be decided, then the bee slave and the others would be free to help. They could help Xiao Chun and the others deal with the primogenitors, even though the primogenitors were stronger than the ancient creatures. However, numbers could make up for this disadvantage. Moreover, with the help of the bee slaves and the others, Xiao Chun and the others had a chance of winning. Then, as long as he defeated the elders, he would be able to find a way to deal with Doomsday. This was the only way Xiao Chun could think of. Seeing that Shi Song and the others had joined forces to besiege Hu Huang, Chun Yin and the others, they now had the absolute advantage. Hu Huang and Chun Yin were both heavily injured, and it would not be long before the victor would be decided. As such, Xiao Chun felt a little better. At least there was still hope. This was the only possibility that could affect the final outcome. If Xiao Chun could think of this, the other primogenitors could probably think of it as well. However, Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu were not worried at all because they were already prepared. The battle in the origin world was still going on fiercely, and the entire starry sky had become a battlefield. Meanwhile, in the land of living beings, who was an unknown distance away from the origin world, it was a peaceful scene. Qin Shu, Lu Bingning, and the others had stayed in the land of living beings and did not follow Xiao Chun and the others to the origin world. However, except for the few of them, all the progenitor realm experts in the land of living beings had been brought to the origin world. In other words, the land of living beings' defense was at its weakest right now, and there were no experts there at all. As usual, after Qin Shiru and the others finished cultivating, they chatted casually. I wonder what's the situation on my husband's side. There shouldn't be a problem this time, right? Gu Lingyao asked worriedly, as she was worried about Xiao Chun. There won't be a problem. This time, our strength is overwhelming, and the origin world cannot win, Tianyu said. Tianyu said, in terms of strength on the surface, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely win. Moreover, Xiao Chun was no longer the Xiao Chun of the past. His strength had long surpassed the progenitors. The women were very confident about the outcome of this battle, and Xiao Chun had also said that the world would be peaceful once the battle was over. Once this battle was over, peace would be restored between heaven and earth. At that time, his family would be able to live a peaceful and stable life. Luan Luan and Lin Feng's wedding is almost on the agenda. Let's do it after this battle. After talking about Xiao Chun, Qin Shiru and the others brought the topic back to Xiao Wan and Lin Feng. Although the two of them had not gotten married yet, the matter was basically settled. Whether it was Xiao Chen's side or Lin Yun's side, they had no objections. Moreover, Xiao Chun had said before that they would do it after this battle. After all, Xiao Wan and Lin Feng were not young anymore. When Xiao Chun was their age, he already had Qin Shiru and Bai Hua Fairy. Hearing Qin Shiru's words, Bai Hua Fairy also smiled. 2 days ago, I told Qin Zhu and the others about this matter. Lin Feng urged me many times. Lin Feng naturally hoped that he could marry Xiao Wan as soon as possible. After all, this was the only legitimate way. In addition to Luan Luan, there are also Yao Heir and Luo Heir. They're almost there. Xiao Yao and Dongfang Lin, Xiao Lao and Lin Shui. In the blink of an eye, the children had all grown up and were about to get married. Speaking of this, Qin Shiru and the others couldn't help but sigh. Who would have thought that time would pass so quickly? In the blink of an eye, Yao Heir and Luo Heir were all grown up. They had all found the person they liked. Thinking about it, after Luan Luan's matter was over, the two of them would probably get married soon. For Qin Shiru and the others, the children's marriage was their top priority. After all, there were many things that they didn't need to worry about at the moment. The only thing they needed to do was to take care of everything at home. Naturally, Xiao Chun would take care of everything outside. It seemed like a harmonious scene. However, unexpectedly, at this moment, a large number of starships suddenly appeared outside the land of all living beings. Without any warning, starships quickly arrived at the land of all living beings. Naturally, this also activated the restrictions that Xiao Chun and the others didn't want to set down. Immediately, Qin Shiru and the others felt it. The smiles on their faces instantly disappeared. They glanced at each other and directly stood up. At this time, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao also hurriedly ran over. Mother, there's a fleet of starships coming towards us, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2977. Qin Shiru and the other women's expressions changed when they heard that the starships from the origin world had appeared here. Not only them, but Lu Bingning and the others also hurried over as soon as Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao finished speaking. Only Lu Bingning, Qin Shu, and the other women were guarding the land of all living beings. This was also the reason why Xiao Chun didn't bring them to the origin world. First of all, they already had enough fighting strength. It wouldn't be a problem even if they didn't have the women. Second of all, the land of all living beings needed someone to guard it. If Qin Shu, Lu Bingning, and the others went to the origin world, there would be no origin world in the land of all living beings. If that was the case, there would not be any powerful beings left in the entire creation land. Not even a single world lord could be seen. In a way, Xiao Qin's plan had saved the land of all living beings. The sudden appearance of the starships from the origin world was also because Qin Shiru and the other women were guarding it. Otherwise, the origin world would have had a hard time resisting it. Without a world lord and progenitor realm expert, it would have been really difficult to stop the attack of the origin world. No wonder the origin world only had close to 1 million people resisting on the battlefield. It turned out that the primogenitors had already planned this. The origin world had mastered the resurrection technique. It was impossible for there to be only 1,000,000 people left. When it had attacked the 4 universes, Ancestor Mu and Shan Yin had sent no less than 1,000,000 cultivators to attack the Netherchild universe. They had suddenly lost so many people. It was unexpected that it was to attack the land of all living beings. Shao Chun and the others had indeed been caught off guard by the fact that they had given up on the main battle and switched to a diversion tactic. The women gathered together, and Lu Bingning spoke at this moment. Contact Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others. They definitely had to inform Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others. However, before that, they needed to stop the attack of the origin world. They couldn't let the people from the origin world enter the land of all living beings. Otherwise, it would be a disaster for the land of all living beings. There is no doubt that the origin world's mission this time was to destroy everything in the land of living beings. If they were allowed to enter the land of all life, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the land of all life. Without many experts, the land of all living beings was indeed too weak right now. It couldn't withstand any torment at all. Upon hearing Lu Bingning's words, Qin Shiru and the other women did not have any objections. They immediately contacted Shao Chun and Lin Yun. At the same time, they rushed out of the land of living beings to fight against the cultivators who were about to arrive in the origin world. He had brought all the martial artists in the land of all living beings. However, because it was a direct battlefield, they had no choice but to fight. At this time, the strongest master in the land of living beings was only at the Emperor realm, and Qin Shu, Lu Bingning, and the others had only brought these Emperor realm cultivators with them. The martial artists below were only there to make up the numbers. In reality, they were not of much use. It would only add to their sacrifices. As for Emperor realm cultivators, there were about 100,000 of them in the land of sentient beings. It seemed like a lot of people, but one should not forget that the land of all life was many times larger than the previous universe. Therefore, it was not strange that there were so many Emperor realm cultivators. On the contrary, it was a very normal thing. The Emperor realm cultivators rose into the sky and soon arrived at the periphery of the land of all life, including Shao Qin. Shao Qin was worried about the safety of his parents, so he did not let Shao Qin go to the battlefield. Even though Shao Qin had the cultivation of a world master now, Shao Chun still let him stay at home. But now, Shao Qin obviously could not turn a blind eye to the attack of the origin world. He immediately went out to fight with Qin Shiru and the other women. Everyone came to the place where the starships of the origin world had to pass. This was a place where the starships of the origin world had to pass through. They were on high alert. They did not have to wait for long before they saw a huge number of starships speeding towards the land of all life. Looking at the number of starships, there were at least 2,000,000 people. The ancestors had only left 1,000,000 people on the battlefield, but they had sent 2,000,000 people to the land of all life. This was undoubtedly telling everyone that from the very beginning, the primogenitors had already thought of a diversion tactic. Perhaps they knew that it would be difficult to deal with Shao Chun and the others head-on, so they attacked the land of all life to force Shao Chun and the others to retreat. One had to admit that the ancestor strategy was really good. Moreover, once Shao Chun and the others knew about it, they would definitely retreat. Whether it was Shao Chun or Lin Yun, they would not let anything happen to the land of all life. They originally thought that these people should be able to block the attack of the origin world, but now it seemed that the number of people in the origin world was more than they had imagined. It was difficult to block the origin world with less than 100,000 people. Although there might be Tao Transformation Realm cultivators on the origin world side, they had too many people. Emperor Realm cultivators alone couldn't stop the attack of the origin world, so Lu Bingning said immediately, "This won't do. We can only let Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Seeking Realm cultivators participate in the battle." Previously, they did not let cultivators below the Emperor Realm participate in the battle because they did not want to sacrifice too many people. But now, it seemed that there was no other way. If they did not continue to increase the number of people, they would not be able to stop the origin world. Hearing Lu Bingning's words, Qin Shiru and the others had no objections. Soon, the news spread to the land of all life. From all over the land of all life, voices soared into the sky. These were all Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Seeking Realm cultivators. Although their cultivations were not as high as Emperor Realm cultivators, they had more people. In a land of all life, all the forces that could be named basically had Emperor Realm cultivators overseeing them. As for Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Seeking Realm cultivators, there was more than one. Some of the more powerful forces even had no less than a few hundred Tao Transformation Realm and Tao Seeking Realm cultivators under them. The number was several times that of Emperor Realm cultivators. The number of people soon exceeded 500,000 and reached nearly 1 million. This was all the strength that Qin Shiru and the others could mobilize at the moment. Nearly 1 million people had to stop the 2 million people from the origin world. The number of people was still less than half of the original number, but it was not impossible. Moreover, Qin Shiru and the others did not need to defeat the origin world. They only needed to hold on until Xiao Chun and the others returned. It seemed that there was still a high chance of success. Under everyone's gaze, the starships of the origin world slowly arrived in front of them and slowed down until they came to a stop. Then, figures rushed out of the starships. Without any superfluous words, they immediately attacked Qin Shiru and the others. These new cultivators of the origin world did not have any emotions. The only thing they knew was to complete the orders given by the ancestors. Please collect, vote, recommend. End of this chapter. Chapter 2978. These new warriors would only listen to the orders of the primogenitors. As for other matters, although they had their own considerations, they wouldn't think too much about it. However, he wouldn't think too much about it. The orders given by the primogenitors were simple. They were to occupy the land of destruction at all costs. Therefore, as soon as these new warriors arrived, they launched an attack. They didn't think about the strength of the land of destruction or whether there were any experts guarding it. They also didn't think about whether they were strong enough to fight against the land of destruction. In any case, these new warriors only had one goal, and that was to take over the land of destruction. Similarly, the primogenitors didn't even think about asking them to retreat. In other words, the primogenitors didn't even think about asking them to retreat. They just wanted them to die. These people had only one goal in mind when they appeared in the land of destruction, and that was to force Xiao Chun and the others to return and buy some time for the origin world to breathe. According to the primogenitors' plan, Xiao Chun and the others would attack the land of destruction as soon as world annihilation awakened. Under such hasty conditions, it was obviously not the time to fight Xiao Chun and the others to the death. First, it was because they hadn't made enough preparations. Second, it was because world annihilation had just awakened. To put it bluntly, there were many things that the primogenitors didn't have a common understanding with him. As a result, it would be very difficult for world annihilation to unite with the primogenitors to deal with Xiao Chun and the others. Therefore, from the beginning, the primogenitors had planned to create a diversion to delay the decisive battle with Xiao Chun and the others. As for the 2 million new warriors, they had set off long before Xiao Chun and the others arrived at the origin world. They had even taken a long detour. They had taken their time to rush to the land of destruction and waited for Xiao Chun and the others to appear after the main battle had begun. The situation was exactly as the primogenitors had planned. The main battle had already begun, and the 2 million new warriors had successfully arrived at the land of destruction. As for these people, the primogenitors would naturally revive them. It could be said that this plan didn't cause any losses to the primogenitors. Since they had mastered the method to revive, they had the capital to do this regardless of the cost and loss. Without giving Qin Shiru and the others any chance to prepare, these new warriors of the origin world rushed over. Seeing this, Qin Shiru and the other women immediately gave the order, and everyone went up to greet them. They definitely couldn't let the flames of war spread to the land of all life. or else many people would suffer. They had to stop them outside the land of all life. Everyone knew this, so everyone charged forward without fear of death. Qin Shu, Lu Bingning, and the other girls took the lead. Without Xiao Chun and the others, the girls were the ones with the highest cultivation bases in the land of all beings. Even Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Lin Feng, Lin Shui, and the others had joined the battle. Usually, they were protected by their parents. At this time, it was obviously impossible for them to hide in the back. As the children of the divine ancestors like Xiao Chun and Lin Yun, these second-generation warriors had their own pride. Qin Shu and the other girls, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others, were naturally strong because of their own combat strength, numerous techniques, and various treasures. They charged into the crowd and soon began to slaughter. It seemed like they were unstoppable. However, apart from them, the other warriors weren't so lucky. Or it could be said that they weren't so strong. After all, in terms of numbers, the origin world absolutely had the advantage. Moreover, in terms of strength, both sides were actually on par. The experts had been led to the origin world by Xiao Chun and the others. So, the difference between the two sides was obvious. Qin Shu, Lu Bingning, and the other girls, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, still had the absolute advantage. The other warriors quickly fell into a disadvantageous position, because every one of them had to face at least 2 new warriors from the origin world. 1 against 2. Under the circumstances of equal cultivation, it was obvious what the result would be. This was exactly what the primogenitors wanted. They wanted to ensure that they had the absolute advantage on the battlefield in the land of all life. The primogenitors had even arranged for more than half of the world lords of the origin world to gather here. This was also the reason why the origin world's army was so weak on the battlefield. It was because the elites of this army were all gathered here. Only by making the land of all life truly feel threatened would they be able to force Xiao Chun and the others to retreat. Otherwise, if the origin world couldn't obtain an overwhelming advantage in the battle here and pose a sufficient threat, then the influence on Xiao Chun and the others would be greatly reduced. At that time, it would be hard to say what Xiao Chun and the others would choose. Only by suppressing the land of all life would they be able to force Xiao Chun and the others to retreat. Otherwise, everything would be in vain. Not long after the battle broke out, both sides began to suffer casualties. Many people from the origin world had died, and, similarly, many from the land of all life had died. However, Qin Shiro and the others were in low spirits when they saw that both sides had lost people, because logically speaking, everyone's losses should be about the same. With Qin Shiro and the others present, the number of casualties wouldn't be too far apart. However, one couldn't forget that the origin world wasn't afraid of death at all. New warriors like them weren't afraid of death at all. Even if they died, they could be resurrected. On the other hand, the land of all life would be truly dead once they died. The land of all life didn't have the method to resurrect the dead like the origin world. Or rather, Xiao Chun and the others didn't possess such a method. Because of this, even if they used their toes to think, it was obvious that the land of all life would be at a disadvantage when both sides suffered the same number of casualties. They were filled with grief and indignation, but there was nothing they could do because they couldn't retreat now. Once they retreated, the new warriors from the origin world would slaughter their way into the land of all life. At that time, the number of casualties would only increase, and the flames of war would spread throughout the land of all life. Then, those who had no cultivation or those with low cultivation wouldn't be able to stop the new warriors from the origin world at all. Countless people would be affected, and these people didn't have the strength to protect themselves at all. Similarly, under such circumstances, Qin Shiro and the others couldn't take care of everything and take care of everyone. They had to stop the attack of the origin world, no matter the price they had to pay. Therefore, Qin Shiro and the others could only do one thing when faced with such a situation. They had to kill the enemy courageously. While the battle in the land of all life had erupted on the other side of the battlefield outside the origin world, Xiao Chun had been fighting fiercely with Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiu for several days. At this moment, he finally received a message from Qin Shiru and the others. The land of all life was under attack. Xiao Qin's eyes flashed with dense, killing intent when he heard the news. He looked at Ancestor Mu and Ancestor Qiao. Chapter 2979. The land of all living beings was being attacked by the Origin World's cultivators, and there were quite a lot of them. Xiao Chun immediately understood that the primogenitors were behind this. Besides them, no one else would have such a method. No wonder Xiao Chun had felt the number of new cultivators from the Origin World was so strange when the battle had started. Logically speaking, since the primogenitors had the resurrection technique, there should be at least a few million new cultivators in the Origin World. However, the Origin World had only sent about 1 million people to fight in the main battle. Xiao Chun didn't have time to think about it before, but now he understood that the primogenitors had sent all these people to the land of all living beings. What a good diversion. He looked coldly at Patriarch Qiao and Patriarch Mu. Facing Xiao Qin's gaze, the two of them guessed that the battle in the land of all living beings must have broken out. Patriarch Mu smiled indifferently. What do you think, Xiao Qin? Are you going to continue to fight with us here, or go back to help? Make a decision quickly. Otherwise, it will be too late. Now, it was Xiao Qin's turn to make a choice. Xiao Chun was furious, but he couldn't do anything about it. How could he not know that this was the best chance to defeat the primogenitors and Armageddon? If he missed it, the next battle wouldn't be so easy. As long as he had enough time, Xiao Chun firmly believed that the outcome of this battle would be decided. As long as Beast's slave and the others were free, they could work together to deal with the primogenitors. Then, Xiao Chun could help little Qing deal with Armageddon. Moreover, there was clearly a gap between Armageddon and the primogenitors. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could Xiao Chun give up such an opportunity? However, the primogenitors had made such a move, which made Xiao Chun feel very helpless. Should they continue to fight and take down the Origin World? Or should they go back to the land of all living beings? If they didn't care, there was a high chance that they could settle the situation in one battle. However, what about the land of all living beings? What about Qin Shiru, his wives, his parents, Xiao Yao, and Xiao Lao? Could they stop the Origin World attack? Or would he die and his Tao vanish? Perhaps they had a chance of surviving, but the land of all living beings would definitely be severely damaged. Moreover, Xiao Chun didn't dare to take the risk. If anything happened to his family, Xiao Chun would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Victory was clearly right in front of their eyes, but they just had to be schemed against by the various progenitors. It wasn't just Xiao Chun. Lin Yun, Dongfang Yun, Mu Lingxian, Mo He, Ancestor He, and the others also received messages and requests for help from the land of living beings. Everyone looked at the primogenitors coldly, with gloomy expressions. Xiao Chun and the others were not in the mood to continue fighting now that their home had been ambushed. The primogenitors weren't in a hurry either. Based on their understanding of Xiao Chun and the others, they knew that Xiao Chun and the others would definitely take care of their families first. As expected, not long after, Xiao Chun took the initiative to retreat. He looked coldly at Ancestor Mu and Xiao Zudao. You old fellows are still as scheming as ever. It can't be helped. We have no choice. Ancestor Mu chuckled in response. Scheming? Perhaps, but what does that count for? Even the primogenitors could create such a scheme. Such a little trick was nothing. As long as they could win, as long as they could deal with Xiao Chun and the others, the primogenitors could use any means. Xiao Chun didn't waste any more words and immediately ordered a retreat. During the fierce battle, everyone had communicated with their divine consciousness. They all chose to rush back to the land of all living beings. The Origin World could attack again, but if something happened to their families, it would be too late for them to regret. Only little Qing was unwilling, but he didn't say anything because he knew Xiao Chen's personality. At such a time, Xiao Chen's first consideration would be the safety of his family. As for the others, they had to wait. Under the command of Xiao Chun and the others, the warriors of the land of all living beings and the land of creation quickly left the battle. Sure, Yung side didn't have the slightest intention of pursuing them. Even the primogenitor just sneered at Xiao Chun, Little Qing, and the others. He didn't continue to attack. After the battle with Little Qing, the primogenitor had already felt everyone's strength. It was about time for him to enjoy himself. Moreover, the primogenitors had already informed him, so the primogenitor naturally wouldn't force Xiao Chun and the others to stay. Everyone quickly boarded the starship and left quickly. On the starship, Little Qing was cursing angrily. Damn it, I knew these old fellows were crafty. They even used a sneak attack. If we didn't take them down in this battle, there will be more trouble in the future, especially with the primogenitor. Little Qing was unwilling. Although the primogenitors had created the primogenitor, anyone with discerning eyes could see that as long as they could persevere in this battle, the final victory would be theirs. In that case, the final victory would definitely belong to them. However, it just so happened that the land of all life had been attacked at the most critical moment. This was the backup plan that the primogenitors had arranged in the dark. If it was in the past, Little Qing would definitely not agree to Xiao Chun and the others' retreat. So what if they lost the land of all life? As long as they could deal with the primogenitors and the primogenitors, everything would be worth it. However, after what had happened before, Little Qing was very clear that even if she didn't agree, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely return to help. In the end, there would probably be another conflict like last time. This was something that the primogenitor would love to see. Moreover, without the help of Xiao Chun and the others, Little Qing wouldn't be a match for the primogenitors and the primogenitors. She might even be killed on the spot. Therefore, after hesitating for a while, Little Qing had no choice but to agree to temporarily retreat. Unfortunately, they had given up this opportunity. The primogenitors would be well prepared the next time they wanted to take down the primogenitor world. The difficulty would definitely be several times higher than this time. It might even be a dozen times higher. Damn it, she cursed angrily. Xiao Chun and the others didn't say anything in response. They felt that it was a pity as well, but there was nothing they could do about it. Family was too important to Xiao Chun and the others. Little Qing, I'm sorry. We didn't expect the primogenitors to do this. Xiao Chun apologized when he saw Little Qing's angry expression. Little Qing glanced at Xiao Chun in surprise when she heard this. She hadn't expected Xiao Chun to say something like this. She was stunned for a moment before she shook her head helplessly. It's not your fault. It's those old bastards' scheme. Forget it. Since it has come to this, let's hurry back to the land of all life. As for the primogenitor world, if we can't do it this time, we'll destroy them next time. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2980. Little Qing hadn't expected Xiao Chun to take the initiative to apologize, so she didn't know what to do for a moment. After what had happened last time, both Xiao Chun and Little Qing seemed to understand how to get along with each other better. Little Qing clearly didn't want to retreat, but she still considered Xiao Chun for the first time. She also knew that Xiao Chun was forced into a corner. Therefore, although she was very depressed, she didn't blame Xiao Chun too much. Xiao Chun also knew that Little Qing was unwilling, so he took the initiative to apologize. After what had happened last time, the two of them were more like friends now. They knew how to think for each other. Little Qing was still a little embarrassed. Little Qing blushed a little, but she still spoke proudly. Since it's already like this, there's nothing we can do. We'll go first. Emohi, Ancestor He, stay behind to take care of everyone. The rest of you, go to the land of living beings first. Perhaps because she was embarrassed, Little Qing quickly changed the topic and suggested that everyone should go first. After all, although the spatial spirit boat wasn't fast, it was far slower than Xiao Chen's group. With the spatial spirit boat's speed, it would take at least 7 or 8 days to reach the land of living beings. However, if Xiao Chen's group rushed at full speed, they could reach the land of living beings in 1 day. Xiao Chan smiled faintly and didn't refuse. After all, time was indeed tight. According to Little Ching, Mo, he, and Ancestor He would stay behind to take care of the army, while Xiao Chen's group rushed back to the land of living beings first. They split into two groups. Xiao Chun and the others dove right into the void. They quickly made their way to the land of all living beings under the power of the spatial laws. While Xiao Chen's group was rushing to the land of living beings, the battle between Qin Shiru's group had reached its climax. Although they had killed many of the origin world's new cultivators, the land of living beings still suffered heavy losses. Faced with the current situation, Xiao Yao took the initiative to come to Qin Shiru's side while killing the enemies. "Mom, we can't go on like this. We're still at a disadvantage in terms of numbers." Carefree's meaning was obvious. They had to send warriors with lower cultivation bases. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stop the attack of the origin world. Qin Shiru's expression was icy cold. His cold gaze swept across the entire battlefield. Xiao Yao was right. They were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. However, once the cultivators with lower cultivation were to fill in, the number of casualties would only increase. However, there was no other way. No matter what, they had to hold on until Xiao Chun and the others came back. Seeing that Qin Shiru was still hesitating, Xiao Yao said helplessly, "Mother, there's nothing we can do about it. We just have to wait for Father and the others to come back." Knowing what Qin Shiru was hesitating about, Qin Shiru's expression darkened when he heard Xiao Yao's words. He immediately made a decision. Soon, more cultivators were drawn out from the land of creation. However, these cultivators' cultivations were slightly lower. With the increase in numbers, the pressure was indeed reduced. However, it was just as Qin Shiru had expected. The addition of these low-level cultivators temporarily relieved the pressure. However, the number of casualties increased exponentially. After all, it was very difficult for these low-level cultivators to protect their own lives in a battle of such scale and level. They were more like cannon fodder standing on the battlefield. They could be killed at any time. Qin Shiru was also very depressed as the number of casualties increased. However, there was nothing he could do. On the other hand, Xiao Yao showed her calm side at this time. She began to make all kinds of arrangements while killing the enemies. Under Xiao Yao's arrangements, the number of casualties was reduced to a certain extent. This was already very difficult. Qin Shiru's eyes flashed with gratification when he saw Xiao Yao's calm command in the face of danger. The two brothers, Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao, did not let Xiao Chen down. One of them was as calm as a general, commanding and controlling the overall situation. The other was more like a match for 10,000 enemies. In contrast to Xiao Yao's calm and collected composure, Xiao Lao was brave and fierce on the battlefield. He gave people a feeling that he was unstoppable. Xiao Lao killed all the way until now. He was definitely the number one in terms of the number of enemies killed. The two brothers had very different personalities. However, they both performed extremely well. Of course, Lin Feng, Lin Shui, Dongfang Lin, and the other second-generation descendants were not to be outdone. The battle continued. With everyone's concerted efforts, a day passed quickly. Just as everyone was engaged in a bloody battle, several spatial gates appeared in the sky. These spatial gates were different from tearing space. Instead, they were passageways opened up by spatial laws. They could explode with even greater speed. Xiao Yao noticed the appearance of the spatial gates immediately. She could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. We finally made it in time. Needless to say, these spatial gates were definitely the result of Xiao Chun and the others rushing back. As expected, Xiao Chun and the others soon stepped out of the spatial gates. After Xiao Chun and the others joined the battle, the situation instantly reversed. Without the obstruction of the primogenitors, these new cultivators were simply cut down like vegetables. The situation on the battlefield quickly turned one-sided. The crisis was instantly resolved with the appearance of Xiao Chun and the others. At the same time, when Xiao Chun and the others finally caught up on the other side in the origin world, the primogenitors were busy reviving the new cultivators who had died in battle. Their souls were constantly flying into the cauldron of heaven and earth. These people were all people who had died in battle in the land of all living beings. On the other side, Qing Zhu and Ancestor Ba were planning something else. The two of them stood in front of a water mirror. In the mirror, a group of cultivators with sorrowful expressions could be seen. Is it really possible? Of course. Haven't you heard of the methods of our origin world? Oh, my poor son. The people in the mirror kept crying and complaining. Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Ba responded calmly. It wasn't difficult to tell from their conversation that they seemed to be making some sort of deal. On the other side of the water mirror was the land of all living beings. These cultivators with sorrowful expressions were actually cultivators from the land of all living beings or the masters of some family or sect. Of course, their cultivation bases weren't strong. However, these people were actually in contact with the primogenitors. This was probably something that Xiao Chun and the others hadn't expected. After a round of discussion and obtaining Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Bai's assurance, everyone thanked them profusely. Then, the water mirror returned to normal. When everything was over, Ancestor Qing revealed a faint smile. Looks like it went smoothly. Who in this world can resist the temptation of coming back from the dead? As parents, who wouldn't want to save their own son if they had the chance? This is our chance. Chaos will give us enough time. That's right. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 2981. Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Ba were actually in contact with the cultivators in the land of all living beings. This was definitely something that Xiao Chun and the others had not expected. Moreover, from the looks of those people, it seemed like they had something to ask of Ancestor Qing and the others. It was already the final moment. In order to win, the primogenitors did not care about any means. As long as they could obtain the final victory, the primogenitors were willing to try anything. They did not know what the primogenitors were doing. Outside the land of all living beings, Xiao Chun and the others attacked, and the battle quickly ended. There were no experts guarding the land of all living beings. Facing the arrival of Xiao Chun and the others, the origin world naturally had no power to fight back. Many new cultivators of the origin world were slaughtered. It seemed like a great victory, but Xiao Chun and the others did not look happy at all, because killing these new cultivators of the origin world had no effect on the origin world at all. After killing them, it would not take long for these people to be resurrected. Therefore, fundamentally speaking, this was not a victory at all. Their faces were calm, and no one could tell whether they were happy or angry. After the battle ended, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others took the initiative to come to Xiao Chen's side. "Father," Xiao Yao called out. "Yes, let's hurry up and count the casualties of this battle." "Got it." As Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao grew up, the two of them were capable of handling many things. Xiao Chun did not hesitate to hand over such trivial matters to Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others. "Feng, or you guys go and help too." In response, Lin Yan also said to Lin Feng and Lin Shui. The cleanup was directly handed over to Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others. With the halo of their fathers, they gradually began to show their abilities. The group quickly returned to their residence. Xiao Chun and the others were not in a good mood after failing to achieve anything in their attack on the origin world. It could not be helped. They had originally thought that the battle was in the bag, but in the end, it ended in such a way. No one would feel good if they were in the same situation. The origin world's tricks are endless, and they have no bottom line now, Mu Ling Xian said helplessly after everyone sat down. No one had expected the appearance of Armageddon. Moreover, Armageddon's strength was indeed not to be underestimated. Little Qing should know this the best. Little Qing, as a spirit of heaven and earth, was unable to deal with Armageddon. To be able to create such a monster, one could see the desire of the primogenitors for victory and how unscrupulous they were. Now that they knew about the existence of the apocalypse, they had to make the appropriate preparations. If they were to fight again, Xiao Chun and the others would definitely be stopped by the ancestors, and little Qin would have to deal with the destroyer world on her own. It could be said that Xiao Qin's side did not have much of an advantage. The only advantage they had was the number of ancient-era living beings. Bee slave, stone pine, wood spirit, old tree, and so on. Xiao Qin's side had an obvious advantage in terms of numbers. After all, the origin world only had Hu Huang, Chun Yin, and the other two primogenitors. Therefore, the primogenitors should be the key to this battle. It seems like I have to tell Bee Slave and the others that the next battle must be decided in the shortest time possible and then join forces to deal with the primogenitors. As long as Bee Slave and the others could pin down the primogenitors, even if it was just one, Xiao Chun and the others would be free. At that time, they would be able to help little Qing. That way, they would be able to expand their advantage. Everyone agreed with Xiao Chen's plan. Moreover, it seemed like it was the only feasible method. While Xiao Chun and the others were discussing the next battle, in the dozens of forces in the Land of Life, the leaders of these forces had gathered the upper echelons of their respective sections. Everyone's expression was solemn. Among them was a large family called the Wang family. This family had moved to the Land of Life with Xiao Chun and the others from the beginning. In the past half a year, they had developed quite well. Although they couldn't be considered one of the top forces in the Land of Life, they could be considered a hero. However, the Wang family patriarch and the various elders had gathered together. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the Wang family patriarch who sat on the main seat. Someone asked nervously, "Patriarch, are we really going to do this?" Once things get out of hand, the divine ancestor's fury isn't something we can endure. The Wang family patriarch's expression was complicated. After a moment of silence, he sighed helplessly. How can I not know this? However, I only had one son in my life. Now that he's dead, what can I do? Only the origin world can help me revive my son. The Wang family patriarch was one of the people who had contacted the green ancestor and the white ancestor. The reason he had contacted the origin world was because the origin world had taken the initiative to contact him. Before the Land of Life had been established, the Wang family patriarch's only son had died in the chaos of war. He had only had one son in his life, so he had been devastated by his son's death. However, who would have thought that the origin world would contact him one day through a secret technique? The Wang family patriarch was furious when he first met the green ancestor. However, when the green ancestor said that he could revive his son, the Wang family patriarch was stunned. The Wang family patriarch felt as if he had been struck by lightning when his son could be revived. Moreover, the green ancestor could do all this without the Wang family needing to do anything for the origin world. In other words, the green ancestor or the origin world could revive the Wang family patriarch's son for free. Faced with such a temptation, the Wang family head had no ability to resist at all and quickly agreed. Perhaps in the Wang family patriarch's opinion, he wasn't betraying the Land of Life because he hadn't promised the origin world anything. However, he didn't think about the current relationship between the Land of Life and the origin world. They were definitely enemies. The origin world's method of reviving the Wang family patriarch's son was very simple. They just had to remove his emotions and desires and turn him into a so-called new cultivator. That way, he could be revived. However, would Xiao Chun and the others allow new cultivators to exist in the Land of Life? Moreover, once the Wang family patriarch's only son became a new cultivator, he would only listen to the orders of the primogenitors. At that time, would the Wang family still be the Wang family? In other words, was the Wang clan an enemy of the land of all beings? At that time, the Wang family patriarch would probably not be able to make the decision by himself. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 2982. In terms of scheming, the Wang family patriarch was no match for the primogenitors. These old monsters who had lived for God knows how many years were extremely scheming. Ordinary people simply couldn't compare to them. On the surface, the Wang family patriarch seemed to have gained the upper hand in this matter. But what was the truth? He had been tricked by the primogenitors. Now that the Wang family had agreed to the primogenitors' request, it would probably cause a storm in the land of living beings. After all, this was no small matter. The Wang family patriarch didn't care about the nervousness of the Wang family elders. In order to revive his son, the Wang family patriarch stood his ground. Very soon, a formation was set up in the Wang family's secret realm. This formation was used by the primogenitors to revive his son. But in reality, this formation didn't have only one function. It also served as a teleportation formation. A teleportation formation had been built in the land of all life without anyone noticing. What kind of concept was this? The patriarch of the Wang family probably hadn't even realized it yet. Moreover, in the entire origin world, there were many forces that had been bewitched like the Wang family. They had agreed because they had lost their loved ones and couldn't resist the temptation of the primogenitors. And now, just like the Wang family, they were setting up teleportation formations in their own territories. In the origin world, people like the Wang family patriarch were excitedly waiting for their loved ones to come back to life after setting up the teleportation formations. Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Bai were in charge of this matter, and they saw that it was progressing very smoothly. Ancestor Qing smiled confidently. If this succeeds, it'll probably be enough to give Xiao Chun and the others a headache for a while. Yes, it can indeed delay for a while. However, Ancestor Mu and the others have to speed up. After all, they can't delay for too long. The primogenitors naturally knew that it was impossible to defeat Xiao Chun and the others with just these little tricks. These little tricks were nothing more than delaying for time. Moreover, they wouldn't be able to delay for too long. At most, it would take a few years, and that was taking into account all the possibilities. However, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Mu would only need some time. Everything else aside, it would be considered a success if they could delay for more than a year. How many formations have been completed? 389. More than 300 teleportation arrays had quietly taken shape in the land of living beings. Such a number was simply breathtaking. Green Ancestor nodded in satisfaction. These 300-plus formations were now hidden in the dark. Once it erupted, Xiao Chun would definitely deal with it first. He wanted to find the more than 300 hidden teleportation arrays in the land of creation. This was not an easy task, and it took a lot of time. This had nothing to do with strength. With so many teleportation arrays, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Mu believed that they should be able to stall Xiao Chun for more than a year. Then let's begin. Without thinking too much, Ancestor Qing and Ancestor White began to act. As for resurrecting those people, it was not a big deal for them. Not to mention reviving once. Even reviving 100 times wouldn't be difficult at all. However, would he still be the same person after his resurrection? The Wang family head and the others might not have realized this problem. After coming back from the dead, he might no longer be the same person he was when he was alive. It was just a shell of the same skin. Time passed day by day. On this day, the Wang family head's only son really came back from the dead in the Wang family's teleportation array. However, at this moment, he had become a puppet without any emotions or desires. However, the Wang family head didn't care about this at all. He was extremely excited to see his son again. Without thinking too much, he went up and hugged his son, crying tears of joy. Scenes like this played out one after another in the land of living beings. Those who saw their loved ones again didn't care about other details at all. As long as they could see the person they wanted to see again and hug him, perhaps their wish would be fulfilled. However, with such joy, these people didn't know that they had completely fallen into the trap set by Ancestor Qing and Ancestor Bai. This was the ability of the primogenitors. They were especially proficient in controlling people's hearts. They knew what the people in this world wanted. At the same time, they also understood why these people were pedantic and stupid. Half a month passed. During this time, Xiao Chun and the others were completely prepared. They planned to attack the origin world again. For the second attack, Xiao Chun and the others were even more well-prepared. They thought of all kinds of possibilities. Of course, the most troublesome one was still the World Destroyer. It would be difficult to deal with the origin world if they didn't deal with him. However, they had thought of a way, and it was indeed feasible. The only thing left was to put it into action. However, Xiao Chun and the others didn't expect that just as they were about to set off and attack the origin world again, a piece of bad news came from the land of living beings. Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others' faces darkened when they heard the news. This was because the news said that traces of a new cultivator had appeared in the land of living beings. What kind of joke was this? How could a new cultivator appear in the land of living beings? Xiao Chun and the others' faces instantly turned gloomy when they heard the news. In the main hall, Xiao Chun looked at Mu Lingxian and asked, "Is the news confirmed?" "Yes, and that new cultivator has been captured." There's no doubt that it's a new cultivator. It was really a new cultivator. Xiao Chun and the others' faces darkened. Lin Yun's face was even colder. What's going on? Why would a new cultivator appear in the land of living beings? We don't know for now. We must investigate this matter thoroughly. Okay, they must get to the bottom of this matter. However, Lil Qing had a different opinion about this. It's just a new cultivator. Isn't this making a big fuss over nothing? Just kill him. Little Qing believed that a new cultivator wasn't enough to make such a big fuss. The most important thing now was to deal with the origin world. Seeing this, Xiao Chun sighed helplessly. I'm not worried about the new cultivator. I'm not afraid of 1, 10,000, or even 1,000,000 new cultivators. What I'm really worried about is how this new cultivator appeared in the land of living beings. You have to know that for the past half a month, we've been taking turns to be on guard. Even the primogenitors can't enter the land of living beings silently. Now that a new cultivator has appeared, where did he come from? This is the most important thing, and also the thing I'm most worried about. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 2983. Just a few new cultivators weren't enough to make Xiao Chun nervous because they weren't a threat to the land of all living beings. What really made Xiao Chun nervous was how these new cultivators had appeared. If they could appear in the land of all living beings without anyone noticing, then they must have some method that he didn't know about. If they had such a method to send new cultivators into the land of all living beings, then would the primogenitors be able to use the same method to enter the land of all living beings without anyone noticing next time? A few new cultivators weren't important, but if the primogenitors were to enter the land of all living beings, then it would definitely be a big problem. Whether Xiao Chun and the others could stop the primogenitors or not, once the battle broke out in the land of all living beings, it would definitely be the land of all living beings that would be harmed. With the strength of Xiao Chun's group and the primogenitors, once the battle broke out in the land of all living beings, it was very likely that the entire land of all living beings would be destroyed. There was no doubt about that. The battle between them would definitely have such destructive power. They had to find out how these new cultivators had appeared here. Otherwise, it would definitely be a big hidden danger. Moreover, if they didn't do anything, what would they do if the primogenitors entered the land of all living beings through this method when they attacked the origin world? Xiao Chun told Little Qing about his worries. Little Qing didn't continue to object after hearing what Xiao Chun said. Xiao Chun's worries weren't unreasonable. It seemed like a small matter, but the hidden danger couldn't be ignored. Then let's find out. We can't lower our guard right now, said Little Qing. Hearing that, Xiao Chun nodded and immediately arranged for Li Tian, Xin Yuanling, Xiao Yao, and Xiao Lao to investigate this matter. Xiao Chun and the others reacted very quickly. The news of new cultivators appearing in the land of all living beings quickly spread. At this moment, all the major forces in the land of all living beings had heard about this matter, and everyone felt anxious. On one hand, they were afraid that the origin world would attack, and the flames of war would spread to the entire land of living beings. On the other hand, they were afraid of the wrath of Xiao Chun. In the land of all living beings, Little Qing and the other primogenitors wouldn't make the saints cower in fear. Only Xiao Chun and the others would do so. Although everything was given to them by Xiao Chun and the other divine ancestors, everything in the land of all living beings was controlled by Xiao Chun and the other divine ancestors. Everyone knew how much the sacred ancestors hated the origin world. Now, a new cultivator had appeared in the land of all beings. The simplest explanation was that someone had secretly created a tradition in the origin world. That was how the new warriors of the origin world could enter the land of living beings. Otherwise, how could they explain their imagination? No one would believe that no one had joined forces with the origin world because it was simply impossible. How could the origin world break the defense of the entire land of living beings without making a sound? Li Tian, Xin Yuanling, and the others thought the same. Therefore, after receiving Xiao Chen's order, they immediately set off and rushed to the area where the new warriors had appeared. The investigation was left to Xin Yuanling, Li Tian, and the others. When faced with such a situation, Li Tian and the others were obviously much better than Xiao Chun and the others. After all, this kind of situation couldn't be solved by relying on strength alone. Li Tian and Xin Yuanling were more suitable. Moreover, Xiao Chun had specially requested to bring along Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Xiao Wan, Lin Feng, and the other second-generation descendants. It could be considered as giving them a chance to train. Lin Yun and the others were very much in favor of this. After all, as they grew older, Xiao Chun and the others wanted to train Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the other second-generation descendants. After all, they would have to grow up and take charge of their own affairs in the future. It was impossible for them to always live under the protection of their parents. Xiao Yao and Lin Feng followed Xin Yuanling and Li Tian on the way from the sacred palace. "Uncle, is this really the method of the origin world?" Xiao Yao, Lin Feng, and the others were very excited to be entrusted with such a heavy responsibility for the first time. In contrast, Li Tian and Xin Yuanling were very calm. They had experienced such things too many times, so they wouldn't be too excited anymore. At this time, hearing Xiao Yao's question, Xin Yuanling smiled slightly. "Most likely, but things may not be that simple. This time, you have to watch and learn more." Compared to Xiao Lao, Xin Yuanling obviously liked Xiao Yao more. Xiao Yao was more calm and liked to use her brain when she encountered problems. Although her cultivation talent was not as good as Xiao Lao's, her personality was more compatible with Xin Yuanling. She could control the overall situation and was more mature and steady than her peers. This was Xin Yuanling's evaluation of Xiao Yao. Hearing Xin Yuanling's words, Xiao Yao nodded, and Lin Feng on the side continued. "Then, if the truth is found out, will there be a great purge of the land of all living things?" Everyone guessed that this matter was likely a collaboration between the inside and the outside. Some forces in the land of all living things secretly communicated with the origin world. But if that was really the case, they would definitely be punished. But when the time came, how many people would suffer because of this matter? It was not easy for the land of all living things to stabilize. If there was too much killing, it was obviously not what everyone wanted to see. Lin Feng was a little worried that this matter would spread too much, and it would be difficult to clean up when the time came. Regarding this, Li Tian smiled and shook his head, but didn't say anything. How much the matter would spread, or how the matter would develop, was not something they could control, because Xiao Chun and Lin Yun's request was very simple. No matter who it was, as long as they found out that they were in cahoots with the origin world, they would be directly eliminated. This was not cruel, but a necessary method. For things like this that crossed the bottom line, they had to be ruthless. Having lived for so many years, Li Tian also understood the principle of this. Moreover, these old fellows had long passed the age of bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind. They did indeed want the land of all living things to be stable and peaceful for 10,000 years. But it was precisely because of this. Some black sheep had to be eliminated, and they couldn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. A rat's droppings spoiled a pot of soup. Li Tian and the others had experienced a lot, so when faced with such a situation, they couldn't be soft-hearted. No matter what the reason was, they couldn't let such a black sheep exist. He glanced at Lin Feng. Lin Feng had a kind heart, but he was still a little immature. Many things couldn't be solved by being soft-hearted. Li Tian was very clear that if Lin Feng wanted to reach the level of his father, Lin Yun, he still had a long way to go. Fortunately, these old guys didn't say that they didn't have time. Everything could be done slowly. There was no need to rush at the moment. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2984. Xiao Yao, Lin Feng, Xiao Lao, and Lin Shui were already outstanding enough. At least among those of the same generation, whether it was in terms of state of mind, cultivation, or battle strength, they were all at the top level. But this was not enough because their fathers were all people who stood at the top of the world. They were existences comparable to the ancestors and the spirits of heaven and earth. If they wanted to catch up to their fathers' footsteps, they were still far from it. There were many things that they still needed to learn, just like Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others in the past. Only by experiencing continuous setbacks could they finally stand at the top of the mountain and look down on all living beings. However, compared to their fathers, these little guys were much luckier and their paths were much smoother. At least they did not have to rely on themselves like their fathers and walk step by step. Their fathers, Xiao Chun and Lin Yun, would arrange everything for them. At least they would clear most of the obstacles for them. A day later, the group arrived at Lu City where the new warrior had appeared. At this time, the new warrior who had appeared previously was imprisoned in Lu City. This was also the first stop for Xinyuan Ling, Li Tian, and the others. The people in charge of Lu City were a large family called the Li family. They were the absolute overlords of Lu City. But at this time, the Li family patriarch and the elders were standing respectfully in the courtyard. They were waiting for Xinyuan Ling and the others to arrive. A day ago, a battle had suddenly broken out in Lu City. It was originally thought to be a very ordinary battle. Although the rules of the city forbade fighting, such an incident could not have reached the ears of the Divine Temple. When they first received the news, the Li family did not pay much attention to it. They only sent people to capture the new warrior. After all, he had violated the rules of the city and had to be punished. Such things had happened before. But who would have thought that it would be a simple matter? Who would have thought that as time passed, it would implicate a new warrior? The people sent by the Li family to capture the new warrior did not manage to catch him. Instead, he escaped. The matter of the new warrior changed the mood of the matter. The Li family was not stupid. They immediately reported the news to the Divine Temple. In a land of all living beings, any force with some status would have the means to contact the temple. Of course, they were unable to contact Xiao Chun and the others directly. They could only contact the people at the bottom of the hierarchy. The matter had escalated to a whole new level. The entire Li family was in fear and trepidation, not knowing how Temple would handle this. At that time, what if the Divine Temple suspected that this was related to the Li family? He felt uneasy, but there was nothing he could do. He could only pray that the truth would come to light and that the Li family would not be implicated. Just like that, the Li family waited anxiously for the experts of the Divine Temple to appear. As the group waited, Xinyuan Ling, Li Tian, and the others quickly arrived at Lu City and landed in the Li family's main courtyard. Greetings, emissary. This time, Xinyuan Ling and the others had appeared as the temple emissaries. Seeing this, everyone from the Li family bowed respectfully under the leadership of the patriarch. Normally, the people of the temple wouldn't travel in the land of beings. They were already detached from worldly affairs and wouldn't compete with the major powers in the land of beings. In the past, it was very difficult to meet the people of the Divine Temple, but every time the temple emissaries appeared, it meant that the matter was serious. Xinyuan Ling spoke first as he calmly swept his gaze across the Li family. Patriarchally, stay. The rest of you may disperse, but you're not allowed to leave the Li family. The Li family naturally didn't dare to have any objections. At the same time, the Li family's defenses were handed over to Xinyuan Ling and the others. This time, Xinyuan Ling and the others brought over hundreds of temple martial artists. These people were the subordinates of Xiao Chun, Lin Yun, and the others. Every one of them was loyal. After the land of beings was established, they had no intention of leaving and join the divine temple. They became members of various levels of the divine temple. To put it bluntly, the divine temple was formed by combining the forces of Shao Chun and the others. It was a classic example of a colossus. It was also because of this that the divine temple had the ability to control this enormous land of beings. The Li family was sealed off, and Xinyuan Ling and the others quickly entered the main hall under the leadership of the Li family's patriarch. In the main hall, Xinyuan Ling and Li Tian sat on the main seats, while the Li family's patriarch stood respectfully below. Tell me what happened. Don't leave out anything. Yes, not daring to hide anything. The Li family's patriarch directly told the whole story. The two parties that fought that day, the new martial artist couldn't be captured, and until now, they hadn't been able to find out his identity. However, the other party that fought with him was captured by the Li family. After investigation, this person was an elder of the Emerald Cloud sect. The Emerald Cloud sect was considered a large sect in this area. If it was any other time, the Li family would definitely not dare to offend the Emerald Cloud sect, let alone capture an elder of the Emerald Cloud sect. However, this was no small matter, so the Li family didn't hesitate to capture this elder of the Emerald Cloud sect. He was still imprisoned in the Li family's dungeon. As for the Emerald Cloud sect, they naturally knew about this matter. Moreover, they understood the seriousness of this matter. Therefore, not only did the Emerald Cloud sect not vent their anger on the Li family, but they also specially sent people to express their willingness to fully cooperate with the Li family's investigation. At this time, an elder of the Emerald Cloud sect was implicated, and the Holy Temple was alarmed. No matter how strong the Emerald Cloud sect was, they wouldn't dare to appear at this time. After listening to the Li family's patriarch, Li Tian whispered softly, "The Emerald Cloud sect? Take me to the dungeon." Then, he asked the Li family's patriarch to take him to the dungeon. Of course, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Lin Feng, and the others went with him. As for Xinyuan Ling, he went to the Emerald Cloud sect. Everyone went their separate ways. At the same time, not far from Lu City, in the main hall of the Emerald Cloud sect, a group of senior members of the Emerald Cloud sect gathered together. At the head of the table, the Emerald Cloud sect's patriarch, who already had the cultivation of a world leader, was gloomy at this time. A world leader was very strong, but in the land of sentient beings, it was nothing, especially in front of the Holy Temple. Why does this matter have anything to do with the Emerald Cloud sect? And where did that new martial artist come from? Asked the Emerald Cloud sect's patriarch coldly. Patriarch, we really don't know. We've already investigated, but we haven't found anything. As the Emerald Cloud sect's patriarch was gloomy, a deacon hurriedly came in. Patriarch, the envoy of the Holy Temple, has arrived in Lu City. He just entered the Li family's residence. The Li family's residence has been completely sealed. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2985. In the Blue Cloud sect, the deacon said that the temple's envoy had arrived in Lu City. For a moment, the Blue Cloud sect's higher-ups fell into silence. Their faces were ugly, including the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor. Speaking of which, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor was probably a person with great luck. In the past, the Emerald Cloud sect was just a small sect, and he was only following a Dao transformation realm martial artist. It was impossible for him to break through to the Emperor realm. But because of the creation of the land of all living beings, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor obtained a great opportunity. At that time, the land of all living beings was simply a cultivation treasure land. Even a pig could break through repeatedly, and the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor had such a great opportunity. His cultivation advanced rapidly, breaking through to the Emperor realm that he didn't even dare to dream of before. But even though his cultivation had undergone earth-shaking changes, the Blue Cloud sect had become a powerful force in the surrounding area. But when facing the temple, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor couldn't help but tremble. Not for anything else, but because everyone knew that everything in the land of all living beings was created by the temple's divine ancestors, and everything they had was given by the divine ancestors. Since the divine ancestors could give them a supreme opportunity, they could naturally take it back. Not to mention, this matter was related to the origin world, and it had undoubtedly touched the bottom line of the divine ancestors. Taking a deep breath and forcing himself to calm down, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor said in a deep voice, "Do you know which sir from the temple is coming?" "Old ancestor, it's Li Tian and Xin Yuan Ling's people. Also, it said that the holy sons are accompanying them." Li Tian and Xin Yuan Ling? Hearing this, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor's face turned ugly. In the land of all living beings, not only were Shao Chun, Lin Yun, and the other holy ancestors famous, but Li Tian and Xin Yuan Ling were also famous. Knowing that Li Tian and Xin Yuan Ling were Shao Chun and Lin Yun's people, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor was stunned. He didn't expect the holy masters to send the two of them. Moreover, they even allowed the holy disciples to accompany them. This already showed the importance that the holy ancestors attached to this matter. This won't do. This old man must personally make a trip to Lu City. Since things have been linked to the Blue Cloud sect, the old ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect knew very well that it was impossible for him to stay out of it. Even if he did not show himself, the envoys from the temple would come knocking on his door, and he would be in an even more passive situation. It had to be said that the old ancestor of the Blue Cloud sect was not old and confused. In this case, taking the initiative to confess was obviously better than pretending to be stupid. However, just as the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor's voice fell, a voice sounded in the hall. "It seems that your Blue Cloud sect is not confused." Along with the voice, Xin Yuan Ling's figure appeared in the hall. He had rushed all the way from Lu City and had not spent much time. To Xin Yuan Ling, this bit of distance was merely a matter of taking a step. Seeing Xin Yuan Ling appear, the Blue Cloud sect's upper echelons were all stunned. Who was this person? How was he able to enter the main hall without anyone noticing? Xin Yuan Ling's reputation was very resounding, but there were actually not many people who had truly seen him before. Therefore, many people had only heard of his name and had never seen him before. Now, even if Xin Yuan Ling stood in front of everyone in the Blue Cloud sect, no one would recognize him. Xin Yuan Ling did not care about this. He just smiled and looked at the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor who was sitting on the main seat. "You're not bad. You know what to choose. I'm Xin Yuan Ling, and I'm here on the orders of the Holy Lord to investigate this matter." Hearing the three words, Xin Yuan Ling, everyone present was stunned. Then, under the lead of the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor, they all knelt and bowed. "Greetings, Lord Envoy." Just now, they were still talking about Xin Yuan Ling. They did not expect him to appear in the next second. Moreover, it seemed that Xin Yuan Ling had heard their previous conversation. Fortunately, they did not say anything that crossed the line before. Otherwise, everyone in the Blue Cloud sect would probably want to die now. Xin Yuan Ling had indeed heard the words of the Blue Cloud sect's people clearly. At the same time, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor also mustered up his courage and said, "Lord Envoy, please understand. The matter of the new cultivators in Lu City has absolutely nothing to do with my Blue Cloud sect. No matter how bold my Blue Cloud sect is, we will not have any connection with the origin world. This matter is really just a misunderstanding. Who would have thought that an elder of the Blue Cloud sect would go out and have a conflict by chance? The other party was actually a new cultivator. This was definitely not premeditated. Of course, if it were not for this matter, the new cultivator would not have been exposed so quickly. After all, the new cultivator only had his 7 emotions and 6 desires extracted. On the surface, there was no difference between him and an ordinary person. After hearing the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor's explanation, Xin Yuan Ling said indifferently, "I will only investigate these matters. Now your Blue Cloud sect is completely sealed. Before the matter is concluded, no Blue Cloud sect disciple is allowed to take half a step out of the sect. Yes, one sentence was enough to seal the entire Blue Cloud sect. Regarding this, the Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor did not have the slightest dissatisfaction. He only took the initiative to cooperate. The Blue Cloud sect's old ancestor was very clear that this matter could only take the initiative to cooperate with the Holy Temple. If they wanted to play tricks, they would only be courting death. Xin Yuanling was quite satisfied with the Blue Cloud sect's attitude, so he reminded them, "As for the elder in Lu City, your Blue Cloud sect can forget about it. He probably won't be able to return. It would be very difficult for the elder to return to the Blue Cloud sect intact." Xin Yuanling was very clear about Li Tian's methods. It would be good if he could keep his life. Although the elder was very likely innocent, so what? The Holy Temple did not have that much time to care about this. They could only use the most direct method to investigate this matter. In response, the Blue Cloud sect's upper echelons repeatedly agreed. Although it was uncomfortable to give up an elder, what could they do? Xin Yuanling successfully arrived at the Blue Cloud sect and started the investigation. In Lu City, in the Li family's dungeon, Li Tian also brought Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, Lin Feng, and the others to see the Blue Cloud sect elder. Seeing Li Tian arrive, the Blue Cloud sect elder was stunned at first. Then he opened his mouth to beg. "It really doesn't matter. I didn't know there was a new cultivator." Seeing that the Blue Cloud sect elder was crying and begging to explain, Li Tian ignored him and planned to use the soul-searching technique. But as Li Tian was about to use the soul-searching technique, Lin Feng stopped him. "Uncle Li, that's not good. With his cultivation, I'm afraid that he won't be able to withstand your soul-searching technique. If it's light, he'll go crazy. If it's heavy, he'll die." Knowing the side effects of the soul-searching technique, Li Tian immediately used it. At the same time, Lin Feng and the others were a little surprised, but also a little reluctant. From the current situation, it seemed that the Blue Cloud sect elder was really innocent. It was unreasonable and too cruel to cripple him like this. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Not asking for the truth, only the results. Was this a one-size-fits-all solution? But wouldn't this be too hasty? What will the world think of the Saint Palace? It doesn't matter. We have to choose the lesser of two evils. We don't have the time to investigate one by one. Children, remember one thing. Since ancient times, merciful people don't command armies. Being merciful was a good thing, but it depended on the time. Blindly being merciful wasn't a good thing. It could even be a bad thing. Just like now, if they followed Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao's plan, they would have to spend a lot of effort to investigate many things. However, did Xiao Chun and the others have that much time? Obviously, they didn't. The attack on the origin world was right in front of them. Xiao Chun and the others couldn't waste too much time on this matter. Therefore, they had to cut the Gordian knot. There was no room for hesitation or mercy. They could only use the most ruthless method to solve this matter in the shortest time possible. Xiao Yao and Xiao Lao fell silent when they heard Li Tian's last words. It was obvious that they were comprehending what Li Tian had just said. The Li family head broke out in a cold sweat. Was this the Sacred Palace's method? Once they acted, they wouldn't show any mercy. They wouldn't give the slightest chance. This was a true leader. They wouldn't be blindly merciful, but they wouldn't be absolutely cruel either. It was very complicated, but that was the truth. Li Tian arrived in front of the Emerald Sky sect elder. He didn't care about the elder's cries at all and directly used the soul-searching technique. The elder's eyes instantly became dull. It was obvious that Li Tian's spiritual energy was constantly attacking him. During this process, the memories of this Emerald Cloud sect elder continuously flowed into Li Tian's mind. There was no need to interrogate him at all. He already knew everything about the Emerald Sky sect elder. While Li Tian and Xin Yuanling were moving at the same time, in Qinshan City, not far from Lu City, in the Wang family mansion, the Wang family head's expression was extremely gloomy. The new warrior that appeared in Lu City previously was none other than the Wong family head's son who had just been revived. After his son was revived, the Wong family head was extremely surprised. At first, he was very careful. However, after seeing that no one had discovered him, he slowly relaxed. However, who would have thought that his son would be exposed just by making a trip to Lu City? Moreover, the Sacred Palace had found out about this matter. Now, it was said that the Sacred Palace's emissary had already arrived in Lu City to investigate this matter thoroughly. After the matter was exposed, the Wong family head could be said to have been unable to sleep for the past few days. He was constantly worried about the development of this matter. Chapter 2987. Hearing that Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling were the ones in charge of the investigation, the Wong family head had not expected this. He had thought that the Divine Temple would at most send a few people to investigate. Now, a mere new warrior was not worth the Divine Temple's attention. Who would have thought that the Divine Temple would send Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling? Now that the two of them were personally involved, the implications were very different. It also proved that the Divine Temple valued this matter. Furthermore, other than Li Tian and Xianyuan Ling, Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the rest of the second generation were also with them. He could not understand why the Divine Temple would make such a big fuss over the appearance of a new warrior. It had to be said that the Wong family head had not figured out what the appearance of a new warrior meant to the Divine Temple and to Shao Chun and the other divine ancestors. A mere new warrior was not enough to make the Divine Temple nervous, let alone a threat. However, the appearance of a new warrior in the land of all living beings was far more significant than a threat. That was why the Divine Temple took it so seriously and swore to find out the truth. What do we do now? Seeing that the Wong family head was deep in thought, the Wong family head asked solemnly. Previously, some people in the Wong family had objected to this matter. They felt that they could not rely on the power of the origin world and should not even have any connection with the origin world. Otherwise, once this matter was exposed, it would be a disaster for the Wong family. However, the Wong family head did not listen to them at all. At that time, he was only thinking about how to revive his son. Therefore, the Wong family head did not care about the opinions of others. He insisted on making this choice. Now, he had been revived, but he had also caused a huge disaster and was targeted by the Divine Temple. They had not found out about the Wong family yet, but with the Divine Temple's methods, how long could they hide this matter? Once the matter was exposed, what kind of outcome would await the Wong family? After he said that, even the Wong clan elder sighed helplessly. He was already regretting his decision. They finally had a stable life in the land of all living beings, but because of the wrong choice, they were now facing a huge disaster. Hearing the elder's question, the head of the Wong family didn't have any good ideas. After pondering for a while, he could only reply in a deep voice, "Take the young master away and hide him. We'll talk about it after this matter blows over. As long as I can't find him, there's no concrete evidence, and the temple can't do anything to me." After all, although the Divine Temple was the sole ruler of the land of all living beings, they still needed a reason to attack a force like the Wong family. But was this really the right thing to do? Or rather, if the young master of the Wong family had his own consciousness, would he feel that his father was doing this for his own good? Rather than continuing to exist in this world in a state that was neither human nor ghost, it would have been better for him to die a little more thoroughly. Looking at the head of the Wong clan who was kneeling on the ground and crying bitterly, Li Tian didn't say anything. The head of the Wong clan was indeed pitiful. He was only doing this because of the love a father had for his son. However, a pitiful person must have a detestable side. Just because of his selfish desires, how much of a threat had he brought to the entire land of all living beings? One had to know that if this transportation array had not been discovered in time, the entire land of all living beings would have experienced a catastrophe. And all of this was because of the head of the Wong clan's selfishness. After a few hours, the young master of the Wong clan was brought back. Looking at his son, the head of the Wong clan cried even more heart-wrenchingly. In stark contrast, the young master of the Wong clan was calm and indifferent. Perhaps even now, he still couldn't understand why his father was crying. Furthermore, he didn't understand what crying represented and what it meant, because he no longer had the 7 emotions and 6 desires. He didn't know how to feel, nor did he have feelings. He wouldn't be sad, nor would he be happy. Looking at the calm young master of the Wong clan in his father's arms, Li Tian sighed. Was this what the head of the Wong clan wanted? Was this the kind of son he had in mind? A body that had the same appearance as his son after a few years? Waving his hand, Li Tian said, "Take them away. Leave no one in the Wong clan alive." Now that things had come to this, the Wong clan had no chance of survival. After such a thing happened, the Wong clan would definitely be exterminated. As the head of the Wong clan cried, the father and son were dragged out. From today onwards, the Wong clan of Qinshan City would no longer exist in the entire land of all living beings. Things seemed to have come to an end here. Xiao Yao, Xiao Lao, and the others were also touched by this. Because of a father's love for his son, things had ended up like this. Seeing how silent they were, Li Tian said, "There will always be regrets in the world. Everyone wants to make up for the regrets in their hearts. They all want to go against the heavens and change their fate. They all want to turn back time." The primogenitors grasped this heart, which is why the head of the Wong clan fell into an endless abyss. He missed his son, but he didn't think that all of this had happened long ago. It can't be changed, and it can't be changed. Trying to change all of this by force will only harm everyone. Li Tian couldn't help but admire the primogenitor's ability to control people's hearts. They knew what all living beings wanted and what their weaknesses were. The 7 emotions and 6 desires were an indispensable part of living beings, but at the same time, it was also their biggest weakness. Therefore, the primogenitors wanted to create a new world and erase the 7 emotions and 6 desires of all living beings. They wanted to create a group of living beings without weaknesses. However, was it really good to be perfect? There were advantages and disadvantages. This was the meaning of life. Li Tian walked out of the room. The Wong clan had been uprooted and the teleportation formation had been destroyed, but he didn't feel relaxed because of this. The Wong clan had been tempted by the origin world and made the wrong choice. Then what about the other forces in the land of all living beings? Was there an existence like the Wong clan? Li Tian's worries weren't groundless. After the Wong clan's incident broke out, the figures of new cultivators appeared in another prefecture far away from Qintianqing. Moreover, it wasn't just one new cultivator this time. At the same time, news of new cultivators appearing in 3 different places in the land of all living beings broke out. Moreover, these 3 new warriors were the same as the young master of the Wong family. They were all discovered by others inadvertently. Everything seemed to be a coincidence, but when so many coincidences were put together, it wasn't as simple as a coincidence. Please collect, vote, recommend. He didn't expect the primogenitors to do so many things without anyone knowing. Moreover, some people in the land of living beings were really stupid. They dared to contact the origin world. To put it bluntly, doing this with the primogenitors was no different from asking a tiger for its skin. They might have achieved their wish with the help of the primogenitors, but that was not the case at all. At the end of the day, these people were still being used by the progenitors. They just didn't know it. The severity of the situation was far beyond imagination. At the same time that Li Tian received the news, Xiao Chun and the others naturally knew about it as well. In the sacred hall, Xiao Chun, Little Qing, Lin Yun, Mu Lingxian, Dongfang Yun, Emo, He, Ancestor He, and the others were gathered together. The 6 of them sat in a pavilion in the garden. Lin Yun and Mu Lingxian's expressions were somewhat unsightly. Mu Lingxian said coldly, "Those old bastards have already infiltrated the land of living beings." It could be said that the primogenitors had already infiltrated the land of living beings, but they hadn't sensed it at all. It was simply laughable. Xiao Chun didn't say anything, but Emohi said, "It's useless now." According to the news Li Tian sent back, they didn't just bewitch people. They also set up teleport formations. We can't treat this matter lightly. We must destroy all the teleport formations. The threat of the new cultivators wasn't great. After all, just a few new cultivators weren't enough to shake the land of living beings' foundation. However, what worried Xiao Chun and the others were the teleport formations. These teleport formations could teleport the primogenitors to the land of living beings at any time without anyone noticing. Once even a single primogenitor entered the land of living beings, the consequences wouldn't be good. It wasn't too difficult for the primogenitors to destroy the land of living beings with their strength. Even if Xiao Chun and the others were to stop them, if a battle broke out in the land of living beings, the land of living beings definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. This was also why Xiao Chun and the others had never thought of using the land of living beings as a battlefield. But now, with these hidden teleport formations, the primogenitors could bring the battlefield to the land of living beings. This was something Xiao Chun and the others were extremely unwilling to see happen. It was also something they couldn't bear. Therefore, these teleport formations had to be destroyed. The most important question now was how many teleport formations there were, and how many people were in contact with the primogenitors of the primogenital world. It was obviously not an easy task to find out about these things in a place that was as vast as the ocean. But there was no other way. No matter how difficult it was, this matter had to be carried out.